Georgian Bay for a special council meeting for Friday, May 26th. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:02 in the morning. And in the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories they traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and all that live on, in, and above it. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this land and who continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take action towards real truth and reconciliation. Miigwech. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? I'm seeing everyone shake their heads. And so we will go on to our first motion, and that is moved by Councillor Bochek, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that council adopts the agenda of May 26, 2023 as circulated. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And our first item of business is the waste management discussion. And I think we've all been in receipt of the report that we got from Hutchison, David Leader, that summarizes all the work he's done the past year regarding our solid waste collection and his data and his conclusions and recommendations. And I don't know, I'll turn it first over to our CAO if you wish to make any comments, and then we'll turn it over to council for your reaction, your comments. And I do not have a motion in front of me other than one that is entirely blank. So if you have any ideas that you want to put into it, we can. We have a couple of follow-up motions, including, one that was not on. We have one follow-up motion from Councillor Fredco to consider, and of course, Councillor Hazelton's second item is in reality a follow-up. So CEO Mariotti, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Councillor Cooper.
Good morning, Mayor Coutier and Council. Yeah, so I think Hutchinson Environmental did a pretty sterling job at trying to summarize what is quite a complex issue. They've come up with some solutions, and a couple of those solutions were discussed with the district, and the district is aware. And the district actually proposed an interesting option, which would be to kind of allow the waste bin sites to transition more to a private management of the bins within the marinas. They would still have to comply with various ministry approvals. However, one marina is already going through this process. I forget if it's in Huntsville or Bracebridge. And I know that the district would be willing to support this transition, as well as the ongoing subsidy of managing waste for our township. So it does need a lot more investigating. I think that if council wishes, I mean, staff can continue discussions with the district and maybe start to drill down into an option that suits our ratepayers and the township. One thing that was actually quite surprising was just the sheer amount of waste that is collected at the marina bin sites. Trying to remember the number now, 80 or 85% of our waste at the township is collected through these sites. So clearly there is a demand to maintain some form of consistency of being able to receive the waste from our ratepayers out on Georgian Bay. Yeah, so I know that the district is receptive to working towards a solution that is a GBT, made solution. And look forward to council's input.
Thank you very much. I believe I already saw Councillor Cooper's hand. Yes, okay, he nodded. So Councillor Cooper, and then anyone else who wishes to comment, please let me know.
Well, thank you, and thank you, CAO Mariotti. I think there's a lot to digest here. But to start with, I wondered, are we hearing from David Leader on this report, or I was surprised? I don't see him here, so I'm curious, was that not part of what was requested? I'm just curious. First question.
So as you may or may not be aware, actually, the report was actually finalized literally a week ago. I think this is the first step for council to kind of digest the report. And if there's any initial, questions, we can always bring Mr. Leader back. Certainly, if we want to start to drill down into some of the options in a bit more detail, we can definitely do that. But I think the report itself is pretty in depth and contains a lot of information that hopefully will satisfy council's initial appetite anyway.
So if I may just to sort of follow up on that, I mean, I could come up with 20 different things that we need to think about, but at the moment, there are a couple of glaring things. One is as already has been mentioned, just the volume, the sheer volume in the township of Georgian Bay. Something doesn't make sense. And that's just, I'm just trying to apply common sense. Why is this the case? And I gave an example to our friends in the district, just in terms of we have almost 50% or about that of our residents that are water access only. And I don't know about others, but I think I do, that are water access. We don't take anything out on the bay unless we absolutely have to. And I'll tell you why, because for starters, you're leaving from, in my case, Aurora. I have to load my vehicle up with gear, and maybe even beer. But we carry some things out to the bay. Minimal clothing. I package goods and so on. I'm very careful because I frankly don't want to have to carry a lot out of my cottage and back to a transfer station or whatever. And so one of the things to know about that water access community, there's really two things. One is the fact that they're only here 5 or 6 months of the year, which should make our volume lower, not higher. And secondly, the amount of work you have to go to get to a water access resort cottage. And what that means is basically loading your vehicle, driving up to a marina, unloading your vehicle, walking all your gear down to a boat, putting it in the boat, driving out to your cottage, unloading the boat, carrying it up to your cottage. And the reason I sort of rattle on here is that that's a lot of work. So why carry anything more than you absolutely have to? So why would this number be so massive? There's something does not make sense. And I'm not saying it's a fabricated number. I'm suggesting that there may be some things happening in our facilities that pushes that number way over the top. And so that I think we need to think about that. And then the other thing I'd like to say is that I'm interested in this report and what it has to say. And I hope that we can figure out certain things like how to make things work in the marinas, because generally it's probably worked better than some would claim. So I think that's worthy of making note of, and but let's make it more compliant in certain ways. But I'm not sure that we can afford to have all the services that we have. We're paying more than anywhere else. So it's not just about volume. It's also about the types of service that we have at the Township of Georgian Bay are causing our costs to just go through the roof. And if we start adding in making things compliant, it's not going to be 2.2 million, it's going to be 3 million. or we're going to have some huge capital costs. So maybe we need to think about some common sense about how many depots, they call them depots. Some of them are just bin sites. They're not even fenced in some cases. How many of those do we have in our township? Maybe we need to be more geographic and consolidate the sites from whatever the number is. It's huge, to one in the north, one in the middle, one in the south, or something like that. So that's another sort of maybe 3 big transfer stations, and as opposed to a whole bunch of sites all over the place. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to go in the order I see the electronic hands. So we'll go to Councillor Predko, followed by Bocheck and Hazelton, please.
Thank you, and through you, the mayor. I really appreciated the report from Hutchinson. I thought I've gotten involved in reading some of the background detail from the district last year, and I found reading this report from Hutchinson, I was nodding my head as opposed to shaking my head, which I've done in the past. So I was I appreciated the complexity, but the ability that seems to exist for creating an environmentally safe bin site and looking for those opportunities for an ECA approval. And I think one of the things that's not really discussed or resolved in the report is how do we resolve the issue about recycling? And I guess in the report, there's stating that 80% of our recycling winds up going to landfill because it's improperly sorted in the bins at the unsupervised sites. That is something that I think we would have to address further. But I think that the larger, more environmentally careful bin sites is a positive approach. I think the supervised sites with limited hours of access is causing problems, and I know we'll probably wind up talking about it more this morning about the South Gibson Bay, Gibson Lake Road Depot, and the restricted hours and the response that the residents have had to that. And I think with the Honey Harbor Depot as well, I think the outcome really is that the residents learn that there are unsupervised sites nearby, and they take their garbage to the unsupervised sites when it's convenient for them. So I think there's a lot of merit to trying to equalize the access, not just have a few depots with specific hours and then some other bin sites, but I think we need to make sure we're looking at a solution that is really equitable across the township. And I think that's all I really wanted to say right now.
Thank you. Councillor Bocheck, please.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor. First thing I wanted to address was a lot of the emails that I've been receiving from constituents with regards to solid waste. And their concern was that the message was not getting through. Firstly, Councillor Graziano, who's the Ward 3 councillor, and Councillor Pretko in Ward 1 have been in communication with myself and other members, relaying your messages to me so that they can be taken to district. So be assured that your voice is being heard, not to mention the 50 or 60 emails I get every day on solid waste. So your voice is being heard, and we're here to try and find a solution. To Councillor Cooper's point, he's correct. I was a general manager of a marina on Georgian Bay for years, and I witnessed the collection of solid waste at these marinas. I can tell you that the cottagers on Georgian Bay care, and I see them come with Tupperware containers full of their foods. I see them being very restrictive on what they bring in the way of solid waste, whereas I see a different demographic come with their big Costco boxes and come with their big Walmart bags full of trash, and never leave the marina and put it in the bins and go home. So there's something we need to address right there. We have people that are paying taxes on their cottages, and we have people not paying taxes, both getting the same service. That needs to be addressed. Secondly, let me just get things straightened here. We are on the corridor of central Ontario with the Highway 400 running right through us. And if you're a cottager or somebody to the north of us and you're heading back home, a lot of times it's just easier to pull over at the Gibson site and drop your stuff off and continue on home, instead of maybe going north to Perry Sound and dropping it off and then coming back and going home. So we need to monitor this, and we need to figure this out. But my main concern is that we have a number of RVs, trailers, trailer parks that create solid waste. We have a number of permanent boaters or cruising boaters or boaters that barely leave the dock that create waste and fill the bins and don't pay any taxes. This is not heard of in other parts of this world. I have a vacation home where I have a RV unit, and I pay a huge amount in the state that I'm in for solid waste collection. So we need to reevaluate trailer parks, permanent boats in marinas, and figure out a way for them to contribute to help to solve the problem that we have. And we'll get into some other stuff as this meeting goes along. But the main point I wanted to make was your voice is being heard, and we are concerned, and we're taking action. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. So a very interesting report, lots of data. That's a good start. I'm not sure that we're there yet. One of the concerns that I have is there seems to be a painting of our township as huge generators of waste. And I think Councillor Bocek touched on a couple of possible sources beyond the residents who pay for it. I think Councillor Cooper touched on some of the other concerns. But one of the things that I wanted to do here is highlight some statistics that just don't make any sense. So I'm going to highlight here Nautilus Marina, with a known 285 customers, generates 40 cubic yard, 40 tons of waste, whatever the numbers are here. Yes, tonnage. So 40 tons of waste a year. Nautilus, by the way, is the largest marina in Honey Harbor. And it's also a marina where the bins are settled well back behind gates that don't actually work. It's 40. The boat club, 120, like 3 times. Now, one might ask, well, where's all that waste coming from? And we have guesses as to where it might be coming from, and it may not be transient. It may be other people using those sites or that site because we don't have a site, for example, at the general store or the town, the park landing or whatever. Then we look at Go Home Lake. There are nominally 450 properties on Go Home Lake, and they generate 180 tons of garbage a year. Now, I doubt very much that Stephen Predko, Councillor Predko, and the rest of Go Home Lake are generating that kind of volume for people on their lake, compared to, for example, if we use Nautilus as a mile marker, a well-controlled, well-contained environment. If we're having 285 people, cottagers, generating 40 tons, how can we possibly get to 120 and 180? And so I think what is visible to me here is that we have the beginnings of data, but we have way more questions now than I had before. How is all this waste showing up in these locations? Is it true use of the waste, or is in fact what the district keeps telling us, there are transient people coming into our communities all the time and dumping garbage? And if that's the case, then how do we control it? And one of the things that we keep hearing from the district is that we are violators, if you will, as a community of waste depots, garbage everywhere. It's a disaster. But I haven't seen any effort by the district to put any technology in place to fully understand what the problem is. Webcams, game cameras that trigger on mobility. These are cheap devices in the overall scheme of the $2+ million that we're spending a year with the district and the waste management. And so surely they could come up with spending $10,000 on cameras that would be able to tell us collectively what the real source of the waste is. And once we know some of that data, then we can go about finding solutions to the problem. But right now, I don't think we've even understood the problem. The problem is huge, and the data is demonstrating beyond a shadow of a doubt that we don't understand what's going on. We just know we have a huge problem, but we don't really have solutions. And implementing the kinds of solutions that are being talked about today doesn't solve the issue of where is the garbage coming from. And I put back out there the Nautilus example, a great mile marker, 285 families mooring at Nautilus, 40 tons a year. That's unbelievable compared to the other stats I'm seeing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jarvis.
Councillor Hazelton, I think made my observations. And I was going to just comment further that the marina I use is Village, and I was concerned that its numbers are going to be higher than numbers actually showed, which I thought was interesting because last year the bins got moved to a more accessible site for the general public, and I had heard from Village Marina that they were sure there were people other than marina users using those bins, but part of the reason there is that the bins are much closer to the road as opposed to well into the marina, as is the case, say, with Nautilus. Another observation I did make apropos of Councillor Hazelton's comments of the boat club is I know for a fact that the one business located on a private road in Honey Harbor, not having curbside pickup, was hauling their garbage by boat around to the boat club and dumping it there until I gave them the schedule for the transfer station, and then they started hauling it up to the transfer station, but they weren't even paying attention to what the transfer station hours were. And it was 6 1/2 dozen the other, probably less expensive because car fuel is less expensive than marine fuel. That was an interesting, just an interesting observation. I've monitored sort of whenever I've been at the Village Marina bins. This year they've put in bins that are more easily accessible. In other words, they've got doors in the front that slide open as opposed to a lid they have to hold up while you're putting your garbage in. I think that's preferable, though those doors can be probably a little too high up and probably heavy, but it's something that's got to be considered. It's all part and parcel of everything that's going on with this report, which I really appreciate, like everybody else. Yes, it's a first step, and it's a good first step. But I'm going to echo Councillor Hazelton's concept here that maybe the district has to get off their butts and truly find out what the source of a lot of this garbage is.
Councilor Graziano, do you want to chime in?
I will chime in. I'm just trying to deal with my technical issues. So if you give me on the next pass, I'll come back. Okay.
I would like to make a few comments then. And I won't be quite as passionate as Councillor Hazelton, but I think he's spot on. There's no question in my mind whatsoever that a significant portion of the garbage collected, and I'm basing this on, people observing activity at different times at different bin sites, is that a significant volume of our solid waste being collected is being generated by non-residents. The district is supposed to provide garbage service for residential garbage only. You have construction garbage or whatnot. You go to the transfer station, you pay your $100 a trailer load or whatever it turns out to be. I found it interesting. I think you all saw the notes. I missed something. Oh dear. Wait, do we 911 or are we okay? Oh, good. Anyway, no, we know that people come off the 400 dumping garbage at the sites that are convenient to them off the 400 because it's cheaper, it's easier, but they're not residents. We know that many a contractor or a self-renovator has been told or encouraged by transfer station, well, just make sure your garbage is small enough to fit in the bin door and stuff that bin. I think it's very interesting. in this report that was prepared, the Honey Harbor Depot, it shows 31.2 tons. A quarter of what is collected at the boat club, interestingly enough. I can tell you, the boat club, absolutely, they are collecting a lot of garbage off the street, a lot of garbage from businesses in the area. I've seen it happen. I think anybody who stands there for an hour or two will see it happen because it's convenient. But what's interesting about the Honey Harbor Depot, the 2 years prior, it collected over 100 tons. Pre-COVID, it was collecting over 80 tons a year. So where has that garbage gone? And, you know, I can speculate. I think some of it's gone to the boat club. I think some of it's gone to other bins. I think some of it has gone home, so to speak, to whoever the person's home is. And I think some of it has been, shall we say, disposed of otherwise, i.e. in the ditch or the backwoods or something. But I think that the you know, one of the expenses we pay is to have crews come over from Bracebridge and wander around our bin sites to do some cleanup. Well, I'm thinking, install cameras. I mean, I was talking to a marina owner just the other day who they're talking about installing cameras at one of their bin sites because they're not supervising it actively. And they know people are coming off the road that are not customers of theirs, who are not resident on their road and dumping garbage because they figure they can get away with it and not pay as opposed to going to the transfer station. And I think that that is, you know, it's in my mind blatantly obvious that, and I hate to use the expression, even though I'm going to, we have low-hanging fruit that we all know about, and yet nothing's being done. Councillor Hazelton's motion that's on our agenda for FoodCyclers is a prime example. We know about FoodCyclers. They've been around for years. It's a brilliant suggestion, and having used one for a month, as it was lent to me by the township, thank you very much. It's terrific. And I missed it this last week, and when I hauled my organics down to Barrie to get rid of them, because that was more convenient than going to the transfer station. I think getting FoodCyclers out, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's like low hanging fruit. And maybe that's fruit's organic, maybe it all fits in. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we monitoring these bin sites? Heck, if we set up a camera, then if a crew's coming from Bracebridge to clean up, they'll know which one to go to clean up because all the other ones are fine. So I really do think, I mean, I greatly appreciated this report that was provided to us. And, you know, I looked at the conclusions and it suggested 4 options. Now, 2 options were steel bear-proof bins, but basically that's for people who are on roads, but the dump truck can't go down to the garbage truck can't fit down their lane. And so maybe at the end of the roadside end of the lane, they will have bins. That's gonna be suitable for a few people. But you know, in the lakeside collection program, I'm sorry, I just don't consider that all that practical for Georgian Bay, given the distances that have to be traveled. It works very well in some sites on inland lakes where most people have road access and a few people have an island, and it's a 5-minute jaunt. Upgrading bin sites to the provincial ECAs. I mean, I personally think that is almost not feasible for some of our marina bin sites because of the costs involved and the requirements. And yet I can't help but wonder, why is it that the yacht havens are allowed to have bin sites put there by private operators and they're perfectly legal? They meet their ECA conditions because those private operators have licenses. I think what we need to do is, 1, do things like the FoodCycler, do things like better recycling. And by the way, with the provincial blue bin program coming in the next couple of years of producer responsibility, that's going to be my personal prediction, and management disaster across this province. But the only time will tell on that. But no, I think we gotta reduce as much as we can the volume coming from our residents, because I sincerely believe that most of our residents, almost all the time, are being very responsible. And I think we're being painted with a brush by the few that are irresponsible, some of whom are not residents, and some of whom are just trying to avoid the transfer site fees for their construction materials. Or, boat wraps or things like that, that should not be, there are not residential garbage. And I think that's, I think that has to be our next steps. And I think when we open this up for round 2, we have to talk about next steps. How do we, the other thing that I don't quite see in this report, but I think we really do have to encourage a district to set up cameras. And to set up so that, I don't know if you saw the letter from the one constituent on complaining about South Gibson Road depot being closed on Victoria Day. Perfectly legitimate complaint and very valuable observations. But she did note there was a pickup truck full of garbage who, when she pulled out her, but the one she was referring to, as soon as she pulled out her camera, he drove away because he didn't want his license plate taken. Well, that's a legitimate resident just taking out his 2 bags of garbage. Give me a break. So I think, as I believe Councillor Hazelton, or maybe 1 or 2 others already observed, setting up a few cameras is a heck of a lot cheaper than hiring all these extra crews running around. And and I think, and as Kate has can't talk properly, as Council Hazelton accurately pointed out, we have data of tonnage per site that do not match the number of residents using those sites. And yeah, enough said for me for this round. We can start round 2, and I see Councillors Hazelton and Cooper already volunteering. Oh, Councillor Graziano, you're sort of past your please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did address my technical issues, and thank you for your patience on that. I also read the Hutchinson report, good report overall. I do have some questions pertaining to the garbage, as Al has already identified. We absolutely, as a township, need a concrete action plan on how we're going to address the many various issues that we have identified here today. And I also echo that I am currently in the process of using the FoodCycler, and I think it's a brilliant machine, as it's reduced the majority of our weight as I take it off the island and bring it to the dump sites. So I would strongly advocate for us to consider reinstating that program, even though it was not budgeted. The issue that I have is that today's conversation, albeit high level, I in my ward, as well as Councillor Predko and along with Councillor Bocek, have an immediate crisis that I think we need to address. And I just don't want to lose sight of that. I'm hoping that at the end of the day today, we can come up with some concrete plans that are going to address the South Gibson Lake bin site as it stands, because I've received over 100 phone calls over the weekend, and probably likely double that in emails. I'm sure that Councillor Predko has, as did Councillor Bocek. And addressing the future state of bin sites and cameras are great. And I think that these are all fantastic ideas. But I do hopefully want to see some concrete action items that are going to address the current situation in South Gibson Lake Road. So my comments so far, and perhaps we can brainstorm on what we can do there. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that Councillor Predko, and we'll get to that shortly, but Councillor Predko has already proposed a motion which will initiate that discussion. But I'd like to do one more round in general before we start getting to specifics, but fully agree. We got to get down and start doing next steps. Councillor Hazelton, please.
Thank you. I'd like to address a couple other topics that have already come up here. One is the issue of people not from a marina, for example, using the bin sites. And I just want to do, well, first of all, I'm very delighted to be learning more about the garbage issues in other areas that I don't see in Honey Harbor. So that's a huge value for me as we sit here and discuss this. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is, and this is just purely by example, Village Marine has bins year round. And so all winter garbage goes into the Village Marine bin sites. And so it doesn't matter what marina you're in, you're going to, either boat club or you're going to Village Marine. Similarly, for example, in Nautilus, they choose to open Nautilus waste management up late in the season, at least 2 or 3 weeks after people start coming up. And so everybody goes over to Village Marine because those bin sites are open. Now, I wouldn't consider that unauthorized use, but it's certainly Village Marine's perspective. If I come over there, they're going to say, well, he's not from my marina. What's he doing here? No, they don't challenge anybody. But the point is, there are lots of good reasons why people would use these bin sites, even if they're not customers of that marina. That is something that I think we need to understand going forward, because when we put policies in place, perhaps authorized use or whatever, we need to understand what the district has currently done in not turning various sites on at the point in time when people start to use them. I have on the topic of curbside, I have a bit of a problem with this whole topic of curbside, because when you listen to the district, you read the report that they produced, they said 2/3 of the properties in the township are non-curbside. That's 4297. And if I do the simple math, that means curbside, we have 2146 curbside pickup locations. I would like to know the statistic of how many actual curbside pickup locations are ever being used, because most of the seasonal residents who want to stay at their cottage as much as they can, but they're generally seasonal residents in Honey Harbor, are not capable of using the curbside pickup because they haven't invested in these giant, expensive, bear-proof bins, and they're not going to put their garbage out and let the bears and other animals disturb it. And so I would suggest that the number of curbside pickup locations is actually a fraction of what that 2147 is. And so again, statistics matter, and I don't think we have the right stats here. We have generalizations, and I think that's a dangerous thing. I want to go back to this authorized versus non-authorized. Perhaps one idea going forward, not coming from the report, is some concept of an authorized or a validated on use. And we've batted around 3 or 4 years ago this concept of passcodes, key codes, whatever, to get access to a fenced-in bin site, as opposed to trying to pay some human to sit there at unreasonable hours. Like one of the things I just jump out here, Mayor, you mentioned the Honey Harbor Depot has got a fraction of what it used to. Well, the number one reason for that is because it's got a human sitting there at unreasonable hours and nobody can use it. I've had residents say to me, I've gone in the middle of the day, it's closed, I have to drive to South Bay Cove. Fine, shut it down. Think of the money we would save, but you just shut it down. By the way, that Honey Harbor Depot is a good use case in what an ECA looks like, because that site has an ECA, and anybody wanting to implement a private garbage transfer location, whatever, would need to get an ECA put in place for that. Here's a bit of a crazy idea, but I am fed up with what I've heard through the district about MECP, and they're forcing us to change these bin sites. And I think what we need to do is we need to get all of our residents to go and find every marina in Ontario that has a bin that services transient boat access cottagers, and turn every one of those places into MECP and say, MECP, you don't have a problem with Honey Harbor. You don't have a problem with Township of Georgian Bay. You have a problem with the entire province of Ontario. Now you go solve that problem, or step aside and let us keep going the way we are, because generally these bin sites are well managed. We have a few exceptions. We'll fix those, but this is unbelievable, the state we are in, because somebody raised the flag for our township and our district, and nobody else in Ontario has to play by those rules. I'm sick of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and I never thought in my life that garbage would create such passion. But we certainly have passion for garbage. And so, you know, what I've been hearing, and I think we're seeing in this report, that there are some red flags all over the place. And I think what we have to think about is at 10,000 feet, trying to identify some efficiencies. Because I think we're seeing a lot of inefficiencies in terms of the kind of service we have. And let me give you an example. We were talking about Honey Harbor, the town of Honey Harbor. People in Honey Harbor have 3 levels of service in many cases. They have curbside, they have a depot, and they have marinas that they can go and dump their garbage, like the boat club. And when you ask people that live in Honey Harbor, well, why don't you use curbside? Oh, because I'm not there on Tuesdays, so I don't need it. And there's a lot of people that are in that boat, so to speak. And so what are we doing? Why do we have inefficiencies like this? That's just one. So it's not duplication, it's called triplication. In the case of Honey Harbor, it's triple times, and it doesn't make sense. So I think we need to think about some of those things. I heard from the district that our transfer station, we apparently charge differently than some of the other transfer stations. And I think we better find out about that. I don't recall all the details other than to say that apparently we provide a lot of freebies. And maybe, why are we doing that? I mean, we need to think about that.
That was previous township councils have made those decisions. But yes,
But we can
it
change
has
it.
to be part of our review.
But we can change that. And so I'm talking about inefficiencies here because I think we're doing some things that are pretty amazing. I think we need to demand things from the district as well. As I understand it, you know, Councillor Predko talked about recycling and sorting. Apparently there's some communities in Southern Ontario that have automated sorting. So you take your your blue and your green or whatever, or I guess it's your paper and your plastic, and there's equipment that will sort it, but we're not apparently doing that. So that's inefficient as far as I'm concerned. Maybe we need to think about forcing the hand on that one. I go to my marina and I sort the paper and the plastic, but I'm finding out that there are several communities in Southern Ontario that have that stuff taken care of. It doesn't require any staff. It's just electronic. So we need to push hard against I think the district for better technologies, including we talked about cameras. So on some of the depots that are unmanned, and I don't know that we really need a lot of manned, we have transfer stations, but depots manned, we've learned in Honey Harbor and elsewhere, it doesn't work. It's not working in South Gibson. It's so cameras, yes, but how about padlocks or of some sort, electronic padlocks, and we give a combination of some sort or a key to our ratepayers. They get to use it. Period. And a camera there too, and try and capture people that are misbehaving. So there are some ways to, if it's fenced in and it's not manned and there's a little bit of electronics, maybe we can make some of these locations more efficient. But I think another efficiency would be, as I think said earlier, we need to maybe do some consolidation. I think we have far more locations, and if you look at most of the other larger, in some cases, municipalities, we have not just a variety of services, but more locations, and Carter has liver pills, as they say. So that's sort of what I think are some of the things that we need to start making a list of the things that we need to deal with and cover each subject matter, and start, even if we just sort of flesh out each one of these ideas and then start weighing the merits or the no merits, and as the case may be. So that's sort of what my suggestion is in terms of a go forward. Go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Predko.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I don't really want to repeat too much what other people are saying, but obviously I agree. I think one of the first steps that we need to address with the district is access and monitoring. I think, cameras and some sort of fence with some sort of access monitoring system that you can track, whether it's a key fob or a code that residents have to get in. And if there's cameras that are motion sensitive, they're only recording when there's something going on. So if there's an incident, there's not an awful lot of footage to have to review to find out who and when that happened. I don't think it's an impossible task to implement rather than going to a manned or supervised site. Just going back to the data, again, I don't want to harp on things that have been discussed too much, but looking back at the winter months for Go Home Lake and Miners Bay Marina's bin sites, according to the statistics, about a quarter of the volume of garbage happens in the winter months compared to the summer months, when probably 1/10 of the population is there. So there's no way that snowmobilers in the winter are generating a quarter of what the summer population is generating. So I agree, we have to have some way to monitor these statistics and validate them, and especially understand where they're coming from, because I don't think they're residents. And the last, going back to recycling, I think there's a lot more that the district could be doing. They could even improve the signage at the sites to highlight the importance of sorting. I don't think there's an awful lot of care, given that in Toronto and other places, you don't have to sort your recyclables. If I think residents knew that their recycling was just going to be put into landfill because it wasn't properly sorted, they would take that extra 2 minutes to properly sort their paper. I don't think education is a high dollar item, and I think it's just an easy low hanging fruit that even our township staff could help with social media campaigns, probably some signage at those locations. And those are the only comments I wanted to make at this moment.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis, please.
I'm going to add to Councillor Predko's and Councillor Hazelton's comments with regards to seasonal garbage. I noticed, and it's something I thought of a while ago and then forgot until these two brought this back to my attention, in that if you look at the numbers, the Honey Harbor Boat Club generates fully 1/4 of its garbage in months when seasonal cottages aren't even there, which is significant. The same with Village Marina, yet Nautilus generates, I think it's 1% or 2%, something like that, of their garbage in those same months. So there's obviously an interesting correlation there that needs to be looked at. I think it's worthy of the district's work, as we've already talked about, of monitoring where this garbage is coming from, especially these times of the years. I would think that it would be better to close these places down and not have that garbage generated in those places, and force people to use transfer station or whatever. It just seems absolutely bizarre that much garbage is generated in those marinas in seasons when boats aren't even in the lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. First and foremost, I'd like to identify an absence here today. I would have hoped that Commissioner Steele would have made himself available today, not to say that he was or received an invite, but perhaps it would have been prudent that we have him here today. Second to that, I want to draw a couple of observations to council here today. On South Gibson Lake Road, we do have a camera to monitor dumping. I don't believe personally that camera is operational, although I could be wrong. I've heard many a times district said that they would review the tapes, and perhaps it is functional. However, there are some challenges in obtaining information pertaining to license plates from the district and our MTO. I don't know where the delays are. I would agree that I think ultimately key fobs would satisfy this. It would certainly save a substantial amount of money, specifically around the cost of having someone supervising facilities or depots at all times, while allowing local residents, to dump their garbage, while of course precluding those that are transient and or contractors that are just passing through. If we can find a way that would allow our sites to be monitored via CCTV in an effective way and reallocate the costs of the people that are supervising, or the consulting company that's supervising both Honey Harbor and South Gibson. Perhaps we can reallocate, or the district rather could reallocate those funds back into having someone monitor the CCTV cameras around the clock. The other thing I want to draw to attention is, I know for the most part, most bin trucks have scales on them. And I wonder whether or not at any time, any abnormal weights as they're picking up these bins to dump or take away are being reported. Because I'd be curious to know, when they're lifting, if one bin is at 40 tons and on the average, each bin on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, when they do pick them up, is averaging 10 tons. Why isn't that abnormality being reported and perhaps being investigated further? It would definitely bring to our attention where and what's happening with our bins and why we're seeing the numbers that we're seeing. And lastly, with regards to sorting, one of the interesting things that I've witnessed on South Gibson Lake Road is that we have two people that, as I would call it, dumpster dive and sort recyclables for us. They take the cans, the beer bottles, any recyclable materials, and they take it down and they return them for profit. So essentially that's what they're doing for us, is sorting our recyclables, at least. And unfortunately, with the new changes, those people are no longer able to do that. And I find that fascinating as well. So they were actually helping us, but here we are now precluding them from their, the ability to do so. So just wanted to bring a couple of attentions here. I do agree that I think CCTV cameras would work very well throughout the course of our township. However, on the back end to that, we would need, a team to review these and make sure that we went after those that dumped illegally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to build on Councillor Graziano's thoughts here, and I had them written down before he even said it. The majority of the weight of our garbage or our solid waste, I believe, is from bottles and cans and metals. These are all things that other municipalities have identified as being the root of the problem. Metal cans, for example, I think you get $1.19 per pound as waste. Tin cans, you get $15 per pound for waste. In some municipalities I see outside of the fire department, a vending machine where kids can come and put cans in and they get a penny a can or 2 cents a can. The fire department sells that waste, gets so much per tonnage, and half goes to their benevolent fund and half goes to administration costs and that kind of stuff. I think we need to think out of the box here. Locally, we have a girl, her name is Brenda. She pedals her bike around and she goes to everyone's blue bin and picks out all the cans and bottles and returns them herself. One of the problems we have is we have no bottle return in the township of Georgian Bay. If I were to have a party and we created a whole bunch of wine bottles and beer bottles and everything, that is a huge amount of weight. There's no place to take it back. You have to go to Coldwater to take it back. And many of the people in this township are of the financial ability to say, I'm not driving all the way to Coldwater to get $2.50. I'm just going to throw it in my recycling bin. Where does it go? Up to district. We need to think out of the box here. We need to create some solutions where we make some of these materials revenue generators. Paper and plastic wrap doesn't weigh that much. I can go into the roadside pickup or the garbage bins. You're recycling, your food recycling, recycle it. Your bottles and cans, let's create a method of getting these out of the transfer stations, get them out of the dump sites, and get them a revenue generator for people of the township. I think there's an opportunity here. I know where I am in the wintertime, part of the winter in Phoenix, I actually put my cans and bottles in the car and go over to the corner and put them in the machine, and I get the 75 cents or $1. We go buy ice cream with it or something. We really need to look at diversion more than anything else. And there's ways we can divert the tonnage going up to the district and the amount we're paying. by thinking outside the box, creating ways that we take stuff out of these bins and get them into revenue generating places within our township. So good point by Councillor Graziano. And we'll build a little bit on that, but it's not the responsibility of the District of Muskoka to solve our problem. It's up to us to solve our problem. And we can do that here in this township. We just need to be creative. And we'll leave it at that because I don't have a plan. But I think collectively with the minds at this table, and they're brilliant minds at this table, maybe except for me, they'll figure out a way. There is a way here. Thank you.
See you, Mariotti, you want to go before or after my remarks?
Thank you, Mayor Kutsia. It was just a couple of comments for clarification, if you may, just to kind of give some information to council that they may not have. So one of the things is cameras. I know council has spoken about cameras. I'm not aware if all of the sites have cameras, but certainly those that do say they have cameras, they do have. And I know there's been on the instances where there have been people that have disposed of garbage outside of the fence. The district did reach out to us with a picture of the license plate and asked bylaw to investigate further. So it's not, it can be quite onerous, but there is a system in place that we do follow up on those transgressors, so that when the district sends us a license plate, sends us the pictures of the waste that's being deposited, then unfortunately district doesn't have a bylaw department, so it falls on the township staff to do the running around and trying to take these people to court. But there are systems there. In terms of the sorting machines, so for the locations that do have recyclable bins, rest assured that this recycling does get sorted. So there are machines that the district takes the recycling materials to then separate out the materials. There are no machines in this province that I'm aware of right now that will recycle absolutely everything. So there are some countries in Europe that you can put everything in a black bag, organics, glass, plastic, you name it. And then there are machines out there that can separate all this material. Not as clean as a good sorting at source, but pretty good. So in discussions with Commissioner Steele at the district, there is an awareness that there needs to be increased public education and outreach to say, please, do your recycling, and the recycling will be taken care of. And the township has offered to promote on our social media, on our website and our other social sites to support that message. But I will reinforce that back to Commissioner Steele that we do need to do a better job at increasing our education and outreach on trying to do the right thing and divert as much as possible. One last comment about, and a very, very good comment about actually taking our empties to a place where it can be, where they can be recycled. And I believe it was the MacTier Legion that reached out to myself when I was at the archipelago, and they offered to put up a little recycling cabin, and I forget which transfer station, if it was Healy Lake or Woods Bay, and to me that was a huge success. It was great. It was a win-win because you're donating back to the community, and I believe the Baxter Lions Club does it as well on Honey Harbor Road, because I take my recycling or my empties there. And so I don't see that as being a huge problem for me to possibly reach out to the district and see if there is an appetite to accommodate these huts that basically then these charity associations or organizations will then manage. It has to be during obviously the hours that the various stations are open, but I see a great opportunity to try and do the right thing there and divert tonnage away from our waste and also give back to our community. So those were my comments.
Thank you. I'll follow up immediately with your last one. Now, I don't think this is a conflict of interest, but I am a Lion, and the Lions are very actively collecting LCBO type bottles. You can take them up to Jimmy's anytime, or and I think they have one or two bins out there. I think at Nautilus they have one. But I think, to me, that is and all the money they make is used in the community. And so I think that's the kind of service that can be expanded into, Councillor Bochek's point that, that's part of being creative. Councillor Bochek mentioned that, it's our responsibility, not district. Well, actually, legally, it's district's responsibility. However, they haven't stepped up to the plate as much as I think most of us would have hoped, or as quickly. And I think that, we have to, between us and district, one way or another, work it out. I am 100% confident, to some other remark that I'm sure Commissioner Steele is either watching this or will be watching it on YouTube, because I know he's fully aware that this meeting is happening, and of course has been copied on the report. And I think that's important to note. I want to make a couple other observations. One is, I think we always have to have in the back of our mind our environmental responsibility, if I can call it that. And that includes, we don't want any of this stuff going into the natural world around us. And we also want a system that's as efficient and effective as possible in collecting our waste. One of the challenges, and I understand it, but I also think we have to also understand our circumstances, is one of the things that district very much wants to do, as do most municipalities. And that's what the phrase you sometimes hear is ownership of garbage. In other words, they want to know who it is throwing out the garbage. And when you have roadside pickup, which of course in most of our province, the majority of garbage, the great majority is roadside pickup. They just they go in the automatic assumption that garbage at the end of the drive belongs to that home. So they can stick a sticker on your blue bin and say, you got stuff in your blue bin that doesn't belong. Or that you put garbage in your green bin, or whatever it is. And of course, when well over 50% of our residents, 2/3 of our residents anyway, don't have curbside pickup, trying to identify who is bringing the garbage and the recycling, what have you, is difficult. But I think we have to look at, I personally think we have to look at ownership of garbage as a nice to have versus a need, because the main reason they want ownership of garbage is for people to be more responsible with their waste. And I believe the great majority of our residents are quite responsible with their waste. So, what we need to do, I believe, is monitor the waste sites. I'm surprised, CO Mariotti, when you mentioned that the district has actually reported license plate numbers to bylaw here, because I've been told for years that A, the cameras weren't operational, or B, they weren't allowed to pursue license plates anyway. So if privacy reasons and that, so if that is true, I think that is absolutely good news. But that further encourages, in my mind, more monitoring to get the license plate of that pickup truck that I was trying to cheat with the garbage on Victoria Day, for instance. I heard mention, I think it was Councillor Hazelton, about all the other marinas around the province and and how their waste collection works. Based on my research, and I admit it's quite limited, but the great majority of marinas around the province serve more often yachters than water access residents. And almost all of them, it's private waste collection. In other words, they hire a private waste collector to place the bins and collect the bins. And because that private waste collector has the appropriate license from the province, everything's fine. And so you get South Bay Cove, they have lots of bins. They're fine because it's a private licensed collector who does it, which just begs the question. Why can't that same private license operator put the bins at Georgia Bay Landing just down the road instead of district? Wouldn't that be the easiest way to get around all this?
It's easier for status quo.
No, let me finish. Because where I'm going with this, I mean, I have my list of things I think we need to do, but I think things like that have to be discussed with the province and the district to say, well, if this is good enough for Joe, Jack, and Jane, why isn't it good enough for Jill? I hope you don't mind all those J names. I hope nobody took offense. I had to pick something. Like, and that's, I think, again, part of what we have to look at, and that'll include discussion with the MECP. Because why did we get in this whole mess? Because somebody left some oil beside a bin, not in our township, but in the district, and it leaked. And therefore, the MECP had to investigate, and they went, oh, this bin site isn't licensed. And somebody from district said, oh, we have 88 other sites like that. That's why we're in this mess. So, but that we can't go back in time. I think that the other comment, couple of comments I want to make, you, Councillor Bochek, talking about weight and all that. In most jurisdictions, anywhere from half to 2/3 of the weight and garbage is organics. And we know how to get rid of most of that weight. And so I think that's something that's well worth for noting. The other thing I want to mention about sorting recyclables. I understand now that the Rosewarne station or somewhere there, they're able to sort through the recycling. The trouble we've had in the past of what they report is about 80% of our recycles are garbaged because they're quote unquote contaminated. Well, I would like to think if there's something inappropriate in that bin and it's going through a sorting station, they can sort out the contaminant, the fact that somebody threw a bag of garbage in the wrong spot. But okay, winding it all down now. To me, I believe that we as a township have to lead the way in taking significant steps towards addressing our solid waste issue. And in my opinion, and it's coming up in our agenda later, I think the number one thing we can do is encourage people to use food cyclers. And those people then that'll be half our weight gone. Or probably a third anyway, because, and it's going to be so much more pleasant, as we all know, because carting organics in our garbage to some place to collect them is a pain in the butt. Got a solution. Two, I absolutely believe we need to do more monitoring of our sites, because as has been well observed, whether they're depots or they're marinas, people take advantage of them to avoid collecting at transfer stations or own homes. I mean, I look at some place like, I'm going to pick Georgian Bay Landing, and you notice that during the winter, their volumes are quite high compared to the summer. And why? Those bins are moved up the hill and they're almost roadside where they are during the winter months. It's easy to drive by, throw your garbage in and drive away. Nobody will see you. You haven't left a mess anywhere. And done. Well, so a lot of, I know that the majority of garbage they're collecting, especially in the winter months, is not from their customers, is not from their homes. It's from, I'll call them neighbors. And the neighbor may be a township or two over, or maybe, around the corner, who knows? But so that, I think we, if we monitor these things, we'll get that, but we'll also discourage the folks who are inappropriately dumping the construction materials, the non-residential garbage. So I think it's number two. Number three, I believe we have to come up with a way, a practical way to make marina waste collection palatable to the district and ministry. And that's going to take a little more effort, but it's going to also, I think, take some logic. I mean, I know, having talked to some people at the provincial level, when you explain to them, hey, we have over half our residents are water access only, that they find that flabbergasting, never imagined. And B, it makes no sense to them when you say this marina can do it, and this marina can't. And the reason is because this marina has yachts and this marina has cottage boats. That's inconsistent. And oh, by the way, every one of those cottage boats is breaking the law because they moved garbage from one private property to a second one. That makes no sense. The province will, I'm sure we can convince the province to come up with some practical solution. I can hope that the district will be on board with all this because they have this responsibility. But I think we have to, if you excuse the expression, drive the bus. So I know I'm not supposed to allow a third round, but I'm going to. But the third round, I want to concentrate on what we're going to do now. Practical next steps. I mean, I believe FoodCycler's monitoring and coming up with a better deal with the province should be on that list, but I want people to fill it in or add. And we're going to start with Councillor Graziano, followed by Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I echo all the suggestions that you've brought forward today, and I appreciate them. I'd like to move a motion from the floor if I can find a seconder, specifically around perhaps conducting or having staff conduct a feasibility study on whether or not it makes sense for us to repatriate garbage away from the district and what that would look like if it is possible. So what would our costs be? What kind of services could we expect from that? Because you'd said something specifically, which is we need to drive the bus. And I think that's the problem here, is that we're not driving the bus. Rather, we're giving the bus, the control of the bus over to someone else that we have no control over. So I'd like to move a motion to see whether or not there's an appetite here in council today to have staff conduct a feasibility study on the possibility of repatriating garbage back to the township.
Maybe it would make some sense to examine the various services that we acquire from the district. In other words, you know, maybe there is some efficiencies in terms of curbside. It certainly appears to be very inexpensive, even if we have a lot of places that aren't actually using it. So there may be, all I'm trying to say is that I think we need some analysis, but maybe look at it from the perspective of what is efficient for us and what isn't. The district also, just to your resolution, people that I spoke to recently, including Commissioner Steele, said that he didn't see any reason why we couldn't, in fact, be selective about what we use and what we don't use. So that there is an appetite already there, I think, to a certain extent. So, and they acknowledged, for example, that Lake of Bays has 4 transfer stations. That's it. That's the service that they chose. And I think we can choose too. So I would be happy to support that if you don't mind me saying. I think we need to look at the various service levels individually as opposed to collectively. That was the only sort of, I was long-winded, but no. Thank you.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, do you want to, are you crafting or are you ignoring? I say that in a professional manner.
I feel like those were ideas and not a
Okay.
specific
All right.
approach to wording.
Okay, so we have moved by Councillor Graziano and seconded by Councillor Cooper, and now let's put some words together.
That would be
Councillor Bocek, your suggestion on,
I think simple wording of the resolution would be better than if we ask staff to look at.
your mic's not on, I know, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think to simplify things in the resolution is just to explore a hybrid system, a sole system where we do it ourselves. Just generalize it so that we staff can go and say, okay, if curbside is the district and we're taking care of this and taking care of that, that's the hybrid system. So investigate whether we would take over solid waste, create a hybrid system, or leave it in the district's hands. That would be a simple point to put on the resolution.
All right, I think we're all singing from the same song sheet, hopefully somewhat in harmony, for those of you who can sing. See, I'm not going to, because you're absolutely right. It would not be pleasant. CEO Mariotti, I see your finger hovering.
He wants a budget.
Thank you, Mayor Coetzee. So if I understand correctly, there are 2 distinct aspects. One is, you know, bringing waste in-house and if I may, I believe this has been brought up before with the district, and the district asked the township to obtain legal advice on the ability to do that. So it's something we can do. We just need, obviously staff needs something in the budget to be able to go and get a legal opinion. And it's not a straightforward thing. We'd have to review the agreements and the various bylaws that the township has with the district and then take it from there. The other aspect of looking at refining and maybe kind of streamlining the way that we collect waste is also a very good idea. If council is comfortable with the work that, say, Hutchinson's has done, we can quickly begin the process with Hutchinson's to maybe start look at refining that in conjunction with the district, because obviously we want the district to remain as a joint stakeholder in this, because they do own the waste as of right now. But I think we need a certain amount of money in there to allow staff to go ahead and start drilling down at refining the system that we have. And B, if staff is comfortable to allow staff to simply go ahead and talk with David Leader and get the ball rolling with Hutchinson. And it may be that David Leader is not qualified enough to do that, but David Leader could maybe recommend staff to say, well, use this other company.
All right. All those hands raised, are you commenting on this potential motion? No, but I think that we should, dare I say, resolve this motion one way or another, and then go on to other ideas, because this won't be the only motion I think we're going to come with, and I think it makes sense to have some separate ones versus trying to put it all into one, because we'll go nuts. So, all right. Well, what I'm hearing so far is we started with the idea of, and Councillor Graziano, of basically looking at the possibility of the township taking over total responsibility for waste collection. And then we also were, Councillor Cooper suggested, or taking over, I'll call it, parts of the collection. And I think that they are related. So, and it's all sort of under an umbrella of the shared shall I call it the shared responsibility of waste collection between district and township. C.O. Marriott.
If I may, we need to look at the legality of us being able to do that. So that's really step number one. Can we legally disassociate ourselves from the district, which is where the legal opinion has to come in. If it says no, it still doesn't mean that we cannot work with the district to say, well, let's streamline what we have and be more efficient. And if we can legally disassociate ourselves, then to Councillor Graziano's other point is now we need to look at a study to say, what is this going to cost us? Because it's not going to be cheap. I'll tell you right now.
But right now, our waste collection is far from cheap. We got the most expensive in the district.
But the district has a landfill, which we are, obviously making use of. So I'm jumping the gun. We just need. It's going to be a fairly complex process that is going to require a fair bit of external resources and funding. But to me, step number one is let's look at the legality of being able to do this, yes or no. And in concert, we can still. There's no reason why we cannot, in parallel, look at ways of streamlining our waste service. Should council, want us to look at that.
Councillor Hazelton, you had a comment on this particular motion, and our clerk has drafted one. So after your comments, I will share what the clerk has drafted.
What do you have?
Your comments might.
Why do you have a read it first?
Okay. You want to share? Or do you want me to share? Go ahead.
Be it resolved that council directs staff to investigate, including the legal rights for the following waste management options. 1, township take over full operation of the services. 2, a hybrid approach between the township and the district. 3, all services remain within the district, and that staff be authorized to spend up to blank amount from the working fund reserve, and that staff report back to council with the legal opinion and potential options.
That's pretty.
Keeper. Keep her
Yeah.
around. She's good.
Yeah, she is useful. She's good. Counselor Hazelton, you're on board.
So I think that's a reasonable capture of the discussions. I would offer that divorcing ourselves entirely from the district, I think is going to be problematic. I think that if we look at legislation, that you'll find that disposal and diversion are the responsibility of the district. And the collection is a potential responsibility of the township. And so I'm not sure we want to waste a lot of time trying to get out of the disposal diversion element. And we have 2 transfer stations. And what we have been asking for 4 years is if we just back it down to 2 transfer stations, what is it going to cost us? And from there, we then have the ability of building up these things. And so anything that the staff would do, the first thing is, yes, you can figure out and confirm the legal path that we can do collection. But number one, we need to get to the finances. And for years, even in the previous term, 2 terms ago, so we were asking for what's it going to cost? What does it cost for this? What does it cost for that? We've never been able to get the number. But we have other townships in our district who have only transfer stations, and we can guess what the cost of 2 transfer stations might be. So we need that number before we can entertain any other path. Because we can't even guess what it might cost us if we don't know the foundational number. So that, I think, has to be encapsulated into the resolution, that we investigate legally what we have paths to, but we also force the district to finally, once and for all, give us the cost for the minimal service of disposal and diversion, which includes the 2 transfer sites we've got. And from there, we can then start playing around with what ideas we might have. By the way, we had lots of ideas to the point where I had lots of conversations with MECP, discussing ECAs, discussing locations, coming up with dollar numbers, understanding lifts and everything else. That was 4 years ago. We've done nothing in 4 years. So this is good that we're starting it, but we want to make sure that we ask the right question of the district, because if we just leave it, well, we might think about going away completely. And of course, that will be a fail. And if we don't get the financials, that too will be a fail. So anyways, I digress.
Okay, be it modified motion, be it resolved, the council directs staff to investigate, including the legal and financial implications of the following waste management options. 1, township takeover full operation of services. 2, a hybrid approach between township and the district. 3, all services remain with the district. And 4, reductions or alterations in services provided. Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I'm reasonably happy with the resolution. I would just very briefly say that I have a bunch of information I can share with our CAO right out of the Municipal Act. Waste collection is something that could be optional for us. It's quite clear. It's written right in the diversion and so forth. That's their sphere. But doesn't mean it can't go somewhere else. Doesn't mean we can't bring in a waste collection firm and take the diversion to Simcoe County, for example. So there are some, I just think we need to explore all options and realize that there is latitude within the Municipal Act. Final thing is, and I really don't want to add my name after this to have another sort of shot at it, so to speak, but I do have some statistics that are part of this, and that is that we need to understand what we're being charged for. And in some discussions I had with the district, I showed them statistics, and they said, well, yeah, that's interesting. And so I think we need to be aware that there's some certain aspects of how things are calculated at the district that Councillor Hazelton's referred to that suggests that there's some pretty weird stuff going on. So afterwards, I'm going to hand each of you some more stats. I'm sure you're just dying to have more statistics, but it's information that says essentially we are being charged for 3,000 properties that have nothing on them.
Yeah, that, well,
It's
we,
the same-
we know that district wide charges for number of properties that exist, not the number of residents that are on them.
And I think but the principle is, doesn't work for us, and there's a reason that they may have done this. If it's Huntsville they're saying basically that they're in Huntsville are, 14,000 properties, but only 10,000 have dwellings. But we know that the other 4,000 are gonna get developed because they're,
Okay, but we're drifting here,
so I know I'm
but
drifting,
but that would be
let's
part
get
of
to-
this.
but it's part of it is
Yeah.
getting the district to come clean with certain data is what
So
I'm really getting at.
we're directing staff to investigate, including legal and financial,
So, and I'm gonna share this with you, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
and the Council Jarvis, did you want to turn on your mic?
I guess I can. Through your honor, I just one point, and with the financial implications of this. Since we are and have been working with district forever on garbage, is it not in their best interest to help financially with any work we're doing that could potentially save them money? It should not part of that financial factor be us seeking
I think
monies from district.
Well, I think that, and that we should probably add a line, in my opinion, and that we apply to district. I mean, we can approve up to say $25,000, but also, and that we apply to district to.
Yeah. Well, how much,
cover
I mean,
these
how much,
costs.
we spend what, $2-something million on garbage? Is that right?
2.2 million.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the David Leader study, they financed 50%. But they're
Boy, that was
supposed to be
generous.
responsible.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
they're all the money they spent on their studies told us that Counselor Cooper is 15 minutes from the transfer station.
Five.
Oh, was it 5?
Five.
So like.
Okay, thank you.
Just to pass along. So I think that we should, I'm suggesting we add that sentence that we apply to district for reimbursement of our study costs. I would get rid of the 50%, just apply for reimbursement. And if they agree to less than 100%, well, no. Because quite frankly, I think that if they say that they're responsible for waste, and they say they want to get to a better place, why is it that our township has to initiate studies to get it going? Because they just keep postponing because they don't, their consultants don't know what to do with water access only. And I'm not trying to be rude or unfair, but the reality is they weren't coming up with solutions for water access only residents.
Oh, yeah.
Theo Mariotti.
I mean, it could also be, because this would be to the benefit of the district if we streamline significantly our waste management system collection. So, I mean, staff could approach the district and maybe ask the district to engage their professionals and do a study and seeing how we can condense, to council's satisfaction.
We suggested to them a year ago, FoodCycler to reduce tonnage significantly. And they expressed a curiosity, and I think that's about as far as it went. So at this point, I have moved by Councillor Graziano, second by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved, the council directs staff to investigate, including the legal and financial implications for the following waste management options. Township take over full operations of the services, a hybrid approach between township and the district, all services remain with the district, and a reduction or alteration of services provided, and the staff be authorized to spend up to $25,000 from working fund reserve, and the council apply for reimbursement from the district of Muskoka for investigative costs, and the staff report back to council with legal opinion and potential options. Counselor, sorry, you're not a counselor. CEO Mariotti.
Can I have some definition on what council understands as hybrid to be?
No. Yeah. That's, for instance, you've had a couple suggestions. I mean, Councillor Hazel said maybe they do the transfer stations and we do the collection. Or maybe they do roadside and we do waterside. For instance, Councillor Hazelton, maybe.
I can't think of a better topic to work collaboratively with your counselors on as you go down this path.
All right,
Let's move.
there you
past
triggered
this.
us well, Councillor Graziano. Okay. All those in favor? And that is carried. That's
Unanimous.
unanimous, and that's resolution number 1 from our discussions. All right, Councillor Bocheck, let's go over to the other end of the table for a moment.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Most people know that I'm a businessman at heart, and any businessman controls expenses. That's the main objective of a businessman. One thing I brought forward to council is about duplication of services, whether it be water quality, no matter what it is in this township, we seem to duplicate services. My question is, we'll take Honey Harbor for an example here. We have curbside pickup that picks up solid waste from every single resident road-based in Honey Harbor. We have marinas with bins from the District of Muskoka to pick up our cottage residents' waste. Now we have this bin site on Honey Harbor Road that everybody's talking about. That seems to be a duplication of services to me, because we already have the curbside pickup and the marinas taking care of our residents on the islands. What is this depot there for? So I think we need to take a good hard look at our depots too, and say, is it a duplication of services, and how much strain is it going to put on our residents? If that site were to close, what would the difference be? In Honey Harbor, I don't think there would be that much of a difference, because the solid waste is covered in Honey Harbor without that site, as far as I can see. So it may be not the same at Gibson or at Go Home. They may be different scenarios, but I think we need to look at options that can be identified from duplication of services again. Because regardless if our 100 tons of garbage comes from 3 locations or 2 locations or 1 location, it's still 100 tons of garbage, and the cost to administer a depot is exorbitant. And we don't need that cost if it's covered in other areas. So let's look at our responsibility as a township of the services that we're getting from the district. Are they being duplicated, and can we slimline those at the same time? Just a thought. Because I think we need to get all the thoughts on the table here, and then we need to have some sort of rationalized discussion on what action we're going to take as a council towards this. I'd like to hear all ideas, and that would be one that I think we should look at, as duplication of services. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Hazelton. For 2.5 minutes maximum.
Oh, see, you didn't hear me yet. So one of the things we've heard about is recycling. I'd like to point out that if I was trying to figure out for my family what to put in the recycling bins, the containers and the cardboard bins. And I went to the District of Muskoka website, and not particularly user-friendly. If you have a particular item in mind, then you could put that name in and it'll tell you where to put it. But there's no list. But if you go to the bin, they actually have a list. Things like telephone books and other things on that list. It's obvious that the district isn't serious about recycling, because if they were, they would have big signs in every recycle bin saying, here are the items you can put in this bin. But they're obviously not taking it seriously, because they don't advertise what should go in the bin, and people just put in the bins whatever they want. So I would say that there is a serious problem from the district's perspective at not highlighting what it is they want residents to do, and their website clearly is not a good path. So one idea that we should be considering here is a sign on bins to help people know what to put in them.
So are you suggesting a motion that we, to the council move, call it to district for more, better information regarding how we use services they're providing?
That's one. I have three more.
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay, we've talked about access. By the way, I don't disagree with Councillor Bochek's ideas on the Honey Harbor transfer, Honey Harbor Depot site, which has got very little use these days. And sadly, if we close it down, some summer students going to miss out on a summer job. Too bad, so sad. But in fairness, there's a lot of other options. And I don't think that, I think if you just had a little sign on the front of the Honey Harbor Depot saying, go to the boat club, you'd solve all your problems with the Honey Harbor Depot. We would save a ton of money because we'd get rid of that trailer. We'd get rid of the porta potty. We'd get rid of the human. And so I think that that is something to consider immediately. But again, signage becomes critical. If they close it down, what do you do? Where do you go? We've also talked about there may be some depots that need controlled access. And I'm horrified with what has gone on South Gibson Lake Road and that transfer site, which with limited hours. And I'm wondering, would it make sense to consider for the balance of the season having some sort of key card or passcode access to that site? And people would, yes, share that amongst themselves, and maybe the occasional violator would be violated. But if we put, as we've already talked about, if we put cameras up and monitor these things, I would rather have the thing monitored and catch occasional bad guys than pay for a human to sit there and provide a non-service at hours that are not reasonable. So I think we need to deal with that topic today as well. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Do we want to discuss? I think so far I'm hearing three potential motions. One is to ask district to consider the value of staffing the Honey Harbor Depot, given how, you know, it's only collecting 30 tons, which is less than over half the marinas, and that there are alternatives in the area. I'm not even sure, and I apologize for my ignorance, but I'm not even sure who is using that depot. And are there marinas that don't have bins that are using it? I'm not sure who actually is using the depot.
I can offer that there are road access people who won't put their garbage out because it's picked up on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and they will try to go to that depot to get rid of their garbage. But if they didn't have that as an option, they would go to a marina site and get rid of their garbage. So it's not like they don't have options, and I'm not sure that it justifies. Yeah, shut up.
But do we want, as a council, do we want to make a motion to district that they no longer staff waste depots? Because they'll probably ignore us, but do we want to make that motion? So key cards or something? I think I mean, we can tie it all in, because I think the monitoring and the controlled access makes a heck of a lot of sense.
Your worship, I would second that.
Okay. Well, I can't move it because so Councillor Hazelton, okay. So let's put together a motion about monitoring and controlled access of waste collection sites. Sorry? Yeah, no.
Through your mayor.
Yeah.
The motion that I had presented earlier about South Gibson Lake, I don't know if we want to.
Why don't I read that and see whether we can tie it in, or if we want this as a separate motion. Councillor Predko had proposed a motion that reads, be it resolved that council direct staff to request a District of Muskoka for the hours of operation to be temporarily removed from the South Gibson Lake Road transfer, so that residents can drop off trash and recycling after hours. And the council directs staff to request a meeting with the District of Muskoka staff to discuss alternate hours of operation as well as alternative methods of monitoring and managing depot sites that could facilitate after hours access to the sites. And the council directs staff to request the District of Muskoka to contact residents of 6 Mile Lake and Gibson Lake to explain the need for limiting the hours of operation, alternatives for disposing of trash after hours, the methods available to provide feedback in those hours, and what the currently proposed hours of operation, I'm going to add actually are. Councillor Cooper.
I think this is fine. I just think we should apply to all manned depots as opposed to just one.
Yeah,
So I think it would cover it off because we've got the Honey Harbor one and who knows where we're gonna end up with somebody in a little box lined up in front of some other depot. So I think we need to cover it off across the township. Thank you.
I'll say all depot sites. And it's just to make it clear, but yes, Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two things on this. I second this motion with Councillor Predko because I agree wholeheartedly that I think we have to investigate changes. The only thing that I would suggest is if we can make it a little bit more narrow and specific rather than broad. I'm a little reluctant to give back to the district and say, well, come back to us with a report from the district. Rather, we go to them with a request, a specific request. I don't know how council feels here about that, on whether or not we allow them to come back to us with information or if we go to them for specifics. The other thing is with regards to the communication, I'm hoping that the district would incur the cost of perhaps sending out a mailer to our residents, apologizing for the issue that has arisen, because it seems like communications may not be their strongest suit, and especially in implementing changes. Secondly, kind of an action plan of what they're intending to do to remedy this. And then lastly, perhaps they can also tie in this mailer how to properly recycle as well and what is accepted in which bins. The reason why I suggest a mailer is because there's a large contingent of elderly population in our lakes as well as our communities that aren't necessarily online. And, as much as we try to communicate this through our social channels, as much as we will try to communicate it through our Facebook pages or our lake Facebook pages, there's going to still be a certain demographic that may not receive this message. And I'd like to be able to have it go directly to their private residences so they can review it and read it.
All right. So what I have done is on the third paragraph, the council directs staff to request the District of Muskoka to contact residents, including a mailer of 6 Mile Lake and Gibson Lake to explain the need for limiting the hours of operation, alternatives to disposing of trash after hours, methods available for providing feedback on these hours, and what the currently proposed hours actually are. There's one other thing you had there that I wanted to add in.
Second. If I may, Mayor Coetzee, then there's been talk here about actually closing down a depot because of duplication. If council wishes to put that on the motion as well, maybe the district can simply say, yeah, sure, you want to close it down, we'll close it down for you.
Well, I'm hesitant to do that simply because nobody's suggesting we close down collection on South Gibson Lake Road or Go Home Lake. So I think it's quite a separate discussion from the Honey Harbor, and I don't want to confuse it, because otherwise people think we're trying to close down other waste depots, and I don't think there's any appetite for that whatsoever amongst us or certainly our residents. So I'd rather not do that on this one.
If I may, Your Worship.
Yes.
Would it be prudent that we also add some information about FoodCyclers in there, if in the event that they do decide to?
No, I think it's
Is that a separate?
yeah. The only other thing I'm going to ask is we're directing our staff to request district, and do we go via the staff or just do we go straight to? Okay, so the council request the District of Muskoka So I'm just going to stroke a few words out here.
You could possibly change it to request to direct, if that's
Council
more.
direct, district, direct. Okay. Be it resolved, the council direct this district, the district of Muskoka for the hours of operation to be temporarily removed from the South Gibson Lake Road transfer so that residents can drop off trash and recycling after hours. And the council direct the district of Muskoka staff to discuss alternative hours of operation as well as alternative methods of monitoring and managing all depot sites that could facilitate after-hour access to the sites.
We can't direct the district.
Okay, that request then, we have to request, we have to be nice about it, okay. I guess we have limited power.
Could we possibly
Desperately wish,
request that they propose different times rather than? If we can read that line again, I think
Okay.
propose would be a better word if memory serves.
propose alternative hours, yeah, okay. I think that reads better. I'll have to go to both Predco and Graziano to see if they agree to these friendly amendments. So let's try here. I got, be resolved, the council request the district of Muskoka for the hours of operation to be temporarily removed from the South Gibson Lake Road transfer so that the residents can drop off South Lake Road, actually depot, that should be. So that residents can drop off trash and recycling after hours, and the council request the district of Muskoka propose alternative hours of operation as well as alternative methods of monitoring and managing all depot sites that could facilitate after hours access to the sites. And the council directs staff to request the district of Muskoka to contact residents of contact residents, including with a mailer of 6 Mile Lake and Gibson Lake to explain the needs for limiting hours of operation, alternatives for disposing of trash after hours, the methods available for providing feedback on those hours, and what the currently proposed are actually are, and a sincere apology for screwing up over and over again. Maybe I shouldn't put that in, but they should. They should. Yeah, I know Commissioner Steele, he is very apologetic.
He has
and
been very
downright
fantastic.
pissed that this got screwed up twice. It shouldn't have either time, but twice and make it, it's, I mean, I feel for the man. But okay.
Your worship, I wonder if we can just, on the last point with regards to the mailer, can we just make it through a mailer rather than communicate? Because I can only imagine that their only option would be a mailer. They wouldn't go on our Facebook pages, I'm assuming. It could be a sign as well, yes.
Just with them,
Or-
instead of including.
I'm gonna say, how about including through a mailer, because I
Sure.
think they should also do the alternatives. Okay. One more time, and Councilors Predco and Graziano, please, after I read this, whether you consider these friendly amendments. Be it resolved, the council requests the district of Muskoka for the hours of operation to be temporarily removed from the South Gibson Lake Road Depot so that residents can drop off trash and recycling after hours. And the council requests the district of Muskoka propose alternative hours of operation as well as alternative methods of monitoring and managing all depot sites that can facilitate after hours access to the sites. And the council directs staff to request the district of Muskoka to contact residents, including through a mailer, of 6 Mile Lake and Gibson Lake to explain the need for limiting the hours of operation, alternatives for disposing of trash after hours, the methods available to provide feedback on those hours, and what the currently proposed hours of operation actually are.
All people. That are mad. I think the other was intended to apologize and deal with problems specifically in some ways. I think it was separate.
Well, I'm hoping too that with all the cost that went into having staff at the Honey Harbor Depot, that they actually have some stats as to who's using it. For instance, and then how to contact those people.
Maybe
But-
we'll get an email on this one of these days.
Maybe. Okay, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, friendly amendment, okay? I mean, because you're both in favor,
Yes.
but you're right, I missed that. I get too excited about this thing. That is unanimously carried. All right. You absolutely.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to address all of our council here on this. I've been on council for 10 years. I've been at the district council for this term. The first I found out about the limiting the hours at South Gibson Lake was after the signs went up. How can I be a councillor? How can I get the message out to my constituents when the first time I know about this is when Councillor Graziano puts a picture of the sign up on Facebook and I go, what? The communication between the District of Muskoka and the Tier 2 municipalities on important issues like this one has been non-existent. And I want to get that message out that we need to be informed as district councillors and of area councillors of any changes that are going to happen for our residents before it actually happens. And some sort of consultation, because this was an absolute surprise to me. I'm sure it was a shock to Councillor Cooper as well too, who's probably more in touch with me, and possibly even to yourself, that didn't even know that these hours up at this depot were going to be changed.
Certainly, you know, through that sign being posted on social media, I learned that it was being closed for the winter. That was news to me.
Yeah.
Apparently it was news to District 2. Like, but you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
This isn't the first time.
No.
There was Honey Harbor and
Yeah.
there was King Bay. They moved the depot up on the road where it had no supervision and out of the marina, no consultation whatsoever with the township of Georgian Bay. I could go on ad nauseum, but these are 3 examples, this is the most recent. FYI.
Your worship, sorry.
Thank you.
And I think that I think district should appreciate that solid waste is a sensitive issue. Councillor Graziano.
I just like to add a point to Councillor Cooper's comments with regards to this not being the first time. Again, I want to go back to my earlier comment around who's driving the bus. And if we're not driving the bus, then we have no control, and we're at the mercy of how they effectively communicate with us or whether they do choose to communicate with us. And again, given that what we've seen, the communication component is not necessarily their strongest suit. So thank you.
Well, and I believe we're having a very fruitful conversation this morning on a very important topic. And we haven't been afforded this opportunity from district. You know, I think they had 1 or 2 public meetings pre-COVID, which a handful of people attended. And they came to conclusions that didn't take it into account some of our challenges. And I'm not, you know, I think district actually has done a very good job in much of their solid waste collection around the district, and I don't want to take away from that in any way. But we have challenges here that weren't included in some of those efforts. And see you, Mariotti.
Thank you, Mayor Coetzee. I think council touches on a valid point. I do know that the district now is aware of how important waste is to the township. The district was not invited here today because today was for council to discuss the report. However, the district has expressed an interest in and willingness to attend a future council session. And I think going forwards, they want to be here more often to improve that communication flow. So I think June might be a little too soon. But so if council is okay with scheduling a meeting with district representatives here in July, that will then give district some time to maybe respond to some of the questions that have been put forward in the motion.
You know, we're certainly looking forward to their response. There's no question about that. Okay. Councilor Butcher.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and through this resolution, are we articulating to the District of Muskoka the intent of Councillor Pretko's original resolution, which was to remove the hours until we get a definitive answer on where we're going with this?
That was the first paragraph.
Okay, so it is,
And then the second paragraph suggested, you know, what can they come up with to get back to? I'm gonna call it a hybrid model between what they want and what we want. I mean, there's gonna be compromise eventually, but let's make it a compromise that mostly works. Counselor Hazelton.
Can we also just reiterate this topic of signs for recycling? Because we have we have old signs on the bins, but there's nothing available easily for anybody to say,
And,
how do
and
I?
there's been confusion on whether or not we have to separate our recycling. If somebody has a QR reader and not all our residents do. But so, I mean, so Counselor Hazelton, you're suggesting that we create a motion that includes significantly improved communication from district, including information of how we should properly sort our recycling and including what is and is not acceptable in the recycling bins.
So Karen, do you have that captured? Because I love
Look at her
what he said.
I was typing.
Oh,
no.
well, we can do it again.
Back up the video,
Okay.
play it again.
Is anybody willing to second Counselor Hazelton's motion of crafting? So Counselor Predco. You're a fourth in line, but we'll allow you to vote for it when we get there.
And we could just ask the clerk to go and review the video and capture your words and just.
Moved by Counselor Hazelton, seconded by Counselor Predco, that Counselor Predco. That council resolved to request the district to significantly improve their communications to our residents and council and staff regarding solid waste
Recycling.
management, including full information on recycling as to how it should be sorted and what can be included.
Mayor, is it too late to request that to be put into a mailer for the final tax bill?
Probably. But yeah, because it's going out in the next couple of weeks, I think.
By the way, I have typed out the lists that are posted on the front of the bins. I could share that with the clerk if you like.
Or maybe you should share it with districts so they can communicate it.
Telephone books?
Mhm.
Come on, what's a telephone book?
It's what you exercise ripping apart
Okay.
what back in your ear. I bet you there are cottages that have full telephone books in them. Okay, moved by Counselor Hazelton, seconded by Counselor Predco. Be it resolved, the council requests the district of Muskoka to significantly improve their communication to our residents, council and staff regarding waste management services, including sorting methods and materials that can be included in.
Are you breaking?
Well, or we could just keep moving for a little bit and see how far we get. Okay, let's keep moving then. I want to get and I think it's Councilor Hazel and you would agree, this is all part of our momentum. I'd like to do your FoodCycler motion. Is Councilor Hazelton listening?
I am, and I'm trying to find my FoodCycler.
Did you hear a seconder for this or should I solicit one? We have a fast volunteer for seconding.
FoodCycler is a good program.
It is. And I'm going to read the motion because I think that's going to handle much of our discussion. Whereas the Township of Georgian Bay has considered the bulk purchase of FoodCyclers, and whereas the Township of the Archipelago has already taken that step and is enjoying broad interest in resident purchase of the FoodCycler, and whereas the timing for a successful rollout in 2023 requires the Township of Georgian Bay to expeditiously proceed with the bulk purchase. And whereas council has provided budget direction for a bulk purchase to be funded from reserves. And whereas these FoodCycler units should be sold to residents at a cost neutral basis for the Township of Georgian Bay. Now therefore be it resolved, the council directs staff to proceed with a bulk purchase of food cyclers and that these food cyclers be provided to residents and staff at a cost neutral, on a cost neutral basis for the township of Georgian Bay. Seeing no hands, I'm gonna say all in favor? Oh, are these new hands or old hands? I mean. Okay, all in favor? Okay, new question, go.
Is it possible to put in here, part of the education, or part of the usage of these food cycles is education? We have a lot of township events, we have the Honeybee Festival, we have golf tournaments, could we put in this budget amount where we could set up an 8x8 tent, have a food cycler there, staff under there, recycling food, showing our residents how these things work. Because I really think that if people see how a food cycle works, they will engage and participate in the program.
I'm sure food cycler would do it without even. CEO Mariotti, do you need that as part of the resolution?
I don't think so. I think the sustainability team can, I mean, we have a food cycler up front here for folks that come into the township office. So I see no problem with our staff when we go out to these various events. You know, the Honeybee Festival, for example, that we're out there anyway. So let's put a food cycler there and just help bring some exposure to it. And once we start now with the process of going, you know, sole sourcing with FoodCycler, we'll start doing some outreach and education on our websites and social media, and we'll definitely get the word out there. And I think FoodCycler has some pamphlets and whatnot to help us do that.
I think it's key. I really think that the major part is education. I mean, for most local residents that are permanent here, we have a air-proof recycling composting. Right? It's something that a lot of us use. Take all our waste out, just throw it in this thing, and turn it every week. That's it. But a lot of people aren't here weekly. They go home for the week, so these food cyclers are beautiful. But educating people on their value is super important. I know most families that I know that they see actually how it works. If they were to see actually how it worked and the benefits of it, I think a lot more people would be engaged and start to use them.
Councilor Cooper.
And while we're there, part of education would be to have an email address for all those people that come and spend
Councilor
some.
Cooper, you've already made that point in this meeting.
Well, here's an opportunity is what I'm trying to get at here.
Councilor Graziano.
Thank you, your worship. And I would absolutely echo what Councillor Bocek has articulated. You know, I was skeptical at first when I borrowed the one that is on loan here at the township as to what it was going to do. And in working with it, it's incredible because essentially it takes all of your green and it distills it down into dirt, which you can then put back and compost into your flower gardens and flower beds. And I think by seeing it, it'll allow people to really, get a general understanding of what it does. But I do have a question, perhaps because I wasn't on the previous term of council when this was initially discussed. Cost neutral. So how is this subsidized to our residents, and what would the cost be overall for FoodCycler, given its retail value versus what its subsidized value would be?
CEO Mariotti.
So we need to negotiate the price with FoodCycler. We've been given pricing in the past based on a certain number of units that we would purchase. Now that we have $75,000, we will then negotiate with FoodCycler for a price, and then what staff will do is we will share that price with council and decide, if council wishes to pass that full cost on to ratepayers, or if they think it's a little too much to subsidize it. I do know that other municipalities do provide an element of subsidy. So anyway, step one is I'll get the price and I'll share it with all of council.
It's in because FoodCycler in the past have been able to take advantage of like federal programs that would reduce the price somewhat significantly. They reduced the price, huge volume discount. And I think we should, I encourage staff also to discuss this with district, that they should maybe pony up a portion of the costs, given that it's gonna reduce the tonnage that they have to handle significantly.
And any cost that they spend on this is going straight back to the township anyway.
Councilor Hazel.
One data point that might be useful for the two new councillors is in the last term when FoodCycler came here, their proposal was essentially if you gave these to your residents, you would save enough in garbage waste lift cost over 2 years to justify the giveaway cost. So it is potentially huge, but I think that starting with a cost neutral basis is a good start. And then as CEO Mariotti said, we can revisit whether we're going to tease it up a little bit and subsidize part of it later or not.
Good. Let's get the ball rolling.
Yes.
All those in favor? And the ball is unanimously rolling. Thank you. Anything else do we want to do about waste at this point? I mean, we've got a few, Councilor Predko. Oh, I get that right now. I can't keep it all straight anymore. Yes, Councilor Pedro.
I just wanted to. Thank you, through the mayor. I just wanted to revisit bottles in the Lions Club, and perhaps we could approach the Lions Club in McTier to have a hut in the South Gibson Lake Road depot for collecting bottles.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Do they do the same?
They do bottle
Okay.
collecting, and I also wanted to mention that they have. I've been talking to Ms. Schneier, and
You're a member now, right?
I'm a member now. I've been talking to Ms. Schneier about having a bottle collection at the large item pickup day at Go Home Lake. So they've agreed that they would have an option to collect bottles at the dock side, as well as take food donations for the food bank. And I believe that Ms. Schneier was investigating the Baxter Lions doing the same for the Annie Harbor.
I think that's excellent.
But I'm not sure if we should have I can approach the Lions or someone, or the township could approach the Lions with regards to whether or not they would be interested before we have a resolution to ask
Yeah,
them.
I think things like that, we don't need a resolution.
Okay.
I mean, there's no question this council has an appetite for serving our community through more efficient collection of any form of waste. Councilor Wojcik. Mike.
Sorry, and through you, Mr. Mayor, so that I'm clear on this, what would happen is we would give the ability for the Lions to put a bin inside a waste depot or bin site, that they would be responsible for picking up the items, returning and gaining the revenues from it, diverting all that stuff from going up to the, how can we not support that?
Councilor Gratiano.
Given that I potentially will be a future Baxter Ward line, and that's on the Ward 3, Ward 1 boundary, I'm curious to know whether or not the Baxter Ward Lions can also assist in there as well.
Yeah.
Why don't we let the two Lions clubs work that out?
Brilliant.
If I may, just again, Nautilus is as a use case may be valuable. What they have done is the Lions Club has got a bin. It's just a probably an old container of some kind, but it's a metal frame with a bin inside. And as people are going up to dump their recycles and garbage, the bins kind of first thing on the path. And they come around, the Lions Club come around and empty it out from time to time. But it's a natural thing and it's widely used. Perfect. So it's a good example of what currently exists. There's no need for a hut. It's just an open metal bin. Throw your bag of bottles and beer cans in there and away you go. It's a great start.
Okay,
I think
everybody run to the washroom if you're so inclined.
normally don't accomplish a whole lot.
Stretch the legs. All right.
Long list of things you're trying to get through.
I think just as Canadians in general, we have been very lazy and really we've created avenues for people to abuse the system, and we've created avenues
We are back. So. New business, item 7C, request for information. Counselor Graziano, I'll let you introduce that topic, please.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. It just the motion today stems from the previous council meeting in that we discussed water quality testing. I'm hoping that I have an opportunity to be able to socialize the scope of work in advance of any report from staff. So this way I can capture any input as well as any questions that my respective lake associations may have pertaining to the scope of work, as well as to be able to identify any comments or concerns that they may have. So staff can understand and hear those comments and concerns and possibly even address them. So simply looking to capture the information on the scope of work that has been provided to staff at this point, and so I can socialize it. Thank you.
Thank you. CEO Mariotti.
Apologies, council. I forgot to put my camera on. Yes, through you, Mayor Kutia. I believe that actually Ms. Nicholson, who's trying to hurriedly arrange for all this testing, because this is obviously new for staff. It's been carried out for many years by Councillor Wianco. So I believe that Ms. Nicholson has reached out to the various associations and also to Councillor Graziano as well, to actually try and facilitate a Q&A session or a Zoom session with the various associations. So the scope of the work, if you like, would be discussed with the associations, but it's something that staff is trying to arrange.
So you're basically saying that the information being requested is not yet available?
The information, so if I recall, there was a request to actually look at a quote, and the response back is staff will be preparing a report and then issuing it to council as a whole, which would include some of the details of the quote. We haven't identified yet if there's any particularities within that quote, excuse me, that might be sensitive or not to put in that report. But if the quote is good to go as is, then we can include that as part of a report to council.
Thank you. So I don't have a motion in front of me at this point. I have a blank piece of paper. I didn't know if you had drafted up a motion for us to discuss.
I did not, and unfortunately, I was not aware that one was required. Rather, I thought we were going to have a meeting around this to discuss it openly. Happy to move one from the floor from the event that that's required, and perhaps I can get a seconder here today with regards to the providing of this information that I'm requesting. So if a fellow councillor wants to second this, and that'd be great. And there we go.
All right, well, then we need that motion in order for us to discuss it.
I know this isn't Cal, but could we not have a bit of a fruitful discussion on this and then come up with the wording for the resolution that would be brought to the floor by Councillor Graziano and second by another member?
Well, but I'm trying to understand the nature of this motion. Like, are we talking something is general, or is there some very specific items of information?
I think that would get aired out if we had a little bit of a
Well,
conversation.
I'm not willing to open this up for a free for all. I'd
You
like to
certainly have that.
get the job done.
Right.
And so I'm going to take what you suggest and go back to Councillor Graziano to get this a little more specific.
So if I may, Your Worship, again, I'm looking for the data specifically around the scope of work and what is going to be provided by the new vendor. And I believe that we are in possession of this information. I was unaware that, our CBO was going to or intended to facilitate a Q&A. That's excellent. I think that's a great approach. I wasn't provided any of that information as of yet, and perhaps because of her absence on vacation right now, she intended to do so upon her return. But I'm under the understanding that staff will still present a report to council in June's council meeting, and I'd like to be able to, in advance of that, review the scope of work and socialize it to see whether there's any questions. So my request here today is to obtain a copy of that scope of work, and that's what I'm seeking. Thank you.
Okay. His way.
As this request originally came to staff, Councilor Graziano was advised that this report and the information he's requesting is coming forward in an agenda package in June as part of a council or as part of a staff report to council. That is the practice and the process set out in the Municipal Act of how council is to obtain information to make decisions. That is their role to receive the information. It's not council's role to obtain information and make their own investigations separate from council as a whole. Obtaining information and speaking with constituents, absolutely. But there's a process set in place. The township has the right to deny information soon to be released. I don't want to refer to this as denying information, but there is a process. This is within the staff's realm of work, and it will be coming forward. So I don't believe a resolution is required to request this information, as it will be coming forward.
My then question, let me call it a clarification. If staff has a report that will be discussed with council probably on June 6th or 5th,
Yes.
Monday the 5th, does that not mean this coming Monday there will be an agenda released?
Yes, the agenda will be released Monday. However, because we're having this discussion now, staff have not started to compile a report pending the outcome of what's happening here. So it may be released sometime the week of June 5th.
You mean next week?
The week before, yes. So it could be towards the end of next week.
Okay, because what I'm trying to understand, and I'll get back to you in a moment, is that if we were to pass a resolution today for this information and this report to be shared with Councilor Graziano, would he not be receiving it at the same time that the rest of us are going to receive it anyway?
I'll defer to the clerk to correct me. So I guess the point is, if council as a whole is voting to receive a copy of the quote from Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser in advance of any report, at which point the report is probably going to be moved anyway. Council has a copy of the quote. So I guess that clerk Wade, you can correct me.
We best practice to circulate the document to all of council, so they're all receiving the same information. So not one person is receiving information separate from another.
Councilor Graziano.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And I'm fine with circulating it to all of council, and at no point did I intend to have it only solely for my own review. But with that being said, I think we're, Your Worship, you're kind of in a similar frame of thought as I am. It will be released in advance of the meeting. I can't imagine that the scope of work, which will likely be included in the report, cannot be released a few days sooner, so we can at least review it and socialize it with our groups and capture the information. The alternative is from a efficiency standpoint, does staff bring their report to council on the 6th and then seek a deferral to then consult with our respective lake associations to determine whether or not there's any concerns or issues. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to socialize this information and capture questions that I may have or they may have, in advance of moving forward. Thank you.
Clerk Wade.
It appears as if you're trying to circumvent the agenda process as set out through the Municipal Act. The intent of the agenda is to provide public information, so the public is advised of decisions and the information that council is also advised of. Providing information separate and outside of that process allows information to be miscommunicated, misconstrued, allows for one population to have information that is not consistent with another population. That's why there's regulations outlined and how councils are to make decisions, how they are to receive information. If we provided this report in advance of that process that is outlined for all municipalities in the province to yourself and or to all of council, we then in turn don't know how you are going to relay that information on to a particular group of residents. And I'm not saying you're going to misconstrue that information. I'm just saying then it's inconsistently provided to members of the population. And that is how misinformation is circulated. It's not so much about this particular document. I feel like we are having a larger discussion here about the agenda process, how information is provided to council, how councils as a whole make information. And I understand sometimes there are restrictions that are frustrating to members of council because you're trying really hard to move an issue forward that is important to your residents. However, staff are here to ensure that we follow the legislation to a T, which is for our protection, the municipality's protection, not our protection, and council's protection to ensure that you're making informed decisions within the proper processes stipulated through the legislation. Whenever we step outside those lines and decisions are made, all of those decisions made when we didn't follow proper process and protocol can then be called into question, and any decisions made may be questioned, or we may have to backtrack and start a process entirely all over again. So the process that we are permitted to provide information for council to make decisions is through the agenda system. And so we are to release the agenda that contains the reports that goes to council and the public at the same time, so you all collectively receive consistent information. And that is the formal process that we are to follow in order for council to make informed decisions. I understand sometimes we want things to move faster than the government permits us to do, but I believe that what is the phrase, slow but deliberate but slow, something like that. So I'm hesitant to release this in advance of the agenda, because if a member of the public came and requested this information at the front counter, I would deny the request and say it is coming forth in a future agenda package. Because that is the process. Council does not have right to access information in an exception to how the public would receive information, right? You receive, the exception might be close in that regard. Obviously, there's exceptions there, circumstances there, but council does not have the right to receive information separately from how the public receives information. So this is one of the reasons why we want to ensure that the processes in place are followed, that the legislation is followed, and that the document is received through a report on the agenda.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to Councilors Bocheck, Jarvis, and Hazelton for comment, please.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, some comments. I had received numerous phone calls from residents on 6 Mile Lake asking me why council approved a 10K budget for the water quality testing by a sole source contract when originally there was $25,000 allocated for it. Their question to me is, what are we losing? What are we not getting? We've taken a sole source contract for a lot less money, and their fear is that they're going to have a lot less quality of water testing. So we were asked to approve an amount in the past council meeting without really having the details of what that amount was purchasing. That was their concern, not my concern, their concern. Councillor Graziano called me about this and said, are you getting any calls about this? And I said, absolutely. So we didn't talk about how we were going to move forward, but I think Councillor Graziano has brought forth a very pertinent resolution here. We don't have the information. And again, we're talking about what could be duplication of services because we didn't have the information. I've reached out to SSEA to come in and do a delegation to us telling us what water sampling they're doing on 6 Mile Lake. I've gone to the District of Muskoka and asked them to do a delegation. What are you offering us in the way of water quality sampling on 6 Mile Lake? So in order to make an informed decision on spending ratepayers' dollars, we have to have that information, or we have to explain to the residents why we made our decision.
But you also understand that our report is coming towards.
Oh, absolutely. I think I made that very clear to staff in an email that I sent, that personally, I was willing to wait for the report to come. But my constituents aren't satisfied with that. And if there was an opportunity to meet and to get this information so that we can quiet the storm, it would be advantageous to all. But it may be too late because this report is coming very soon. But I really do think we should have had a comprehensive report before we voted on the motion a month ago. Just my comments. I'm not expecting an answer or a commitment from anybody, but I think we've kind of stepped out of the order of things the way they should have been done on this one. And now we're hearing the consequences from our constituents.
Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, two things. One is I know that we already have information from the group that has done the testing on Georgian Bay and the parameters that they use for that testing. And I know that they will be using at least those parameters on the inland lakes, if not more. But if we were to provide what testing has been done so far with what parameters, I think that would be a good guideline to work from for any work that's going to be done in the inland lakes. That's one. So that's information that should be available because we are already getting test results. I think we're 2 years into this with the Patshaw Fraser Group and McMaster. So why not have that information available? Two, a helpful point to the 6 Mile Lake cottagers and Go Home Lake and the other inland lakes is it would probably be better to have a session that's open to ideas from the cottagers on what they want, as opposed to telling them what they're going to get. And perhaps leaving it wide open leaves their minds wide open as to what they need on their lakes. So I don't see a conflict on this. I was sympathetic when I was first hearing this. I mean, information is important. It is, well, it's what it is. It's information, which is critical. But if people's minds get closed on what they're getting and they don't think about what they want, it might be better to leave it that let's find out what they want, period.
All right, thank you. Councillor Hazelton, please.
Thank you. So I've heard we'll call it the riot act, so to speak, from our clerk about what we can and can't do. I will offer that when it comes to staff and council communications, we are an anomaly, apparently, because when I attended the advanced planning session, I heard from other counselors who were talking about having a much more open relationship with staff. And getting information like this is a no-brainer. And even to the point where planners would meet with the local counselor and discuss topics that might be sensitive prior to writing a report so that they can gather input from what is going on in the community and through the counselors. And no counselor on any of these advanced training sessions suggested that, first of all, it was illegal or inappropriate. They all championed the idea of more open communication as being a good thing. Now, that's a general comment. And I would suggest that we don't, as a council, run the council meetings or all of our activities by the book, so to speak. There's a lot of flexibility from time to time. And I would suggest that that is healthy when it comes to an effective working relationship. Now, specifically on this water quality topic, I think that, first of all, I don't know when staff received the quote from Great Lakes, Georgian Bay Great Lakes Foundation. I'm guessing they've probably had it for a couple of months because we've been talking about this $10,000 number for 2 or 3 months. I think in this specific case, it warrants and warranted the release of that information much sooner, because what there's that gap between 10K and 25K. But the point is, every day we delay, we lose the opportunity of impacting the program for 2023. And so I think that in this case, we have lots of reasons why a simple request and a delivery of, here's a quote so far, don't take it as gospel. This is a working document. Staff are going to be working up a report later, but here's the starting point. What do your constituents likely want? And how can we make a better program perhaps than what Councillor Wienko was delivering and get a better outcome for all of the community? So back to my earlier point, we don't always have to work according to the letter of the law, because other townships are not doing that, and they have exceptional cooperation between staff and council and communication. And I think that we need to investigate and experience some of those strategies to get to a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. And with the utmost respect to our clerk today, I was under the impression, and perhaps I'm incorrect, but I was under the impression that if there was a request for data and that perhaps required council's input as well as approval, that we could come to council, call a meeting such as the one that we've called today, and request that information and have council vote on it. I think we discussed that recently in a recent meeting. I believe the municipal act suggests that we as councillors are entitled to certain amounts of data. Suffice it that it's not contrary to any legislated laws that prohibit it. And I believe we've recently moved a bylaw in this or bylaw amendment rather in this council recently, suggesting that we also want to be able to receive data, and whether that bylaw is live or not is not for debate here today. Rather, we did move one collectively as council seeking data. I think data is essential for us to be able to do our jobs and be able to make informed decisions on behalf of our constituents. And I understand that perhaps there could be at times some confusion or misunderstandings or misinformation, as I think our clerk called it. But in this particular context, we're requesting a scope of work that's been defined already, that can be easily circulated to our constituents or my association heads for that, and have them review it and ask questions. I think this request is only really asking for our staff to provide it a few days in advance of what they are otherwise going to be providing it anyways. I can't imagine that it's going to do that much damage to this township from a liability perspective, or the best that it can do is have our constituents be able to table some of their concerns. As Councillor Bocek advised, I've been receiving numerous phone calls and some concerns. Water quality seems to be a very important issue in our township, specifically on the inland lakes, and I believe on the coastal Georgian Bay side as well. And this is an issue that a lot are wanting to know more on. So again, my understanding, just to simplify or to conclude, is that we do as a council have a means in which to request data when our staff feels perhaps they don't wish to provide it, and I am executing that mechanism here today. Thank you.
CEO Mariotti.
Thank you, Mayor Krutsier. So we're at this point to Councillor Hazelton's comment about staff working more closely with council. We're at this point because we tried to move expeditiously. Staff was aware that various councillors had met with Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser in the past. Council have told staff of the good work that Dr. Pat Chow-Fraser does. And the budget was passed in April. Council wanted testing to start in June. Staff inherited this file that previously Councillor Wienko has handled for years and years and years. And so what staff did was to ask from council, and there was a discussion at council before council approved the motion to go ahead and sole source for expediency for up to $10,000. If council was concerned that they wanted more information, council could have said staff, you know what, we understand the verbal feedback that staff is giving, that Patchogue-Fraser would also introduce DNA testing and so on and so forth. But if council wanted more information, we could have come back then with a report. So there is close collaboration. There's close collaboration with the 6 Mile Lake Cottages Association, because, as I said earlier, Ms. Nicholson had emailed the association and copied Councillor Graziano on the 18th of May. And basically, Ms. Nicholson was asking Councillor Graziano for some assistance in speaking to the associations. There was information that was provided based on what Councillor Nguyenka was doing in the past, but also Ms. Nicholson was trying to set up a Zoom meeting with the people who want to volunteer and those that have questions with Dr. Patchogue-Fraser. So that dialogue is happening in the background to try and set something up that our ratepayers are happy with. Yes, council approved a $10,000 sole source motion. However, you're absolutely right. We have $25,000 in the budget. So let's get the process started. Let's get the new organization in to be familiar with the various lakes. And of course, we have another $15,000 by which to increase testing as we go through the process of getting familiar with the new testing. Totally agree that we need to streamline this. There are multiple organizations that are doing water quality testing, and I don't know if council remembers, but staff added a line item in the budget for $15,000 to go through a proper RFP process for 2024 through to, I forget if it was 25 or 26. So we understand that we need to, streamline the process. But for the here and now, and for the expediency of maintaining the testing, we try to implement something as quickly as we could to start testing in June. Going back to the point of having access to documents and information as an individual council as opposed to as a whole. Council will see that there is a policy that was attached to this agenda. And in it, it says that as individual members, they have no greater access to records or information held by the township than any member of the public, and that they cannot access records or information otherwise protected from disclosure by the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy or in accordance with the process set out in the statute. So I tried to explain this a little bit in context. If I may, because it can happen. In simplest terms, imagine you're walking into the municipal building and you're requesting a copy of a quote that you heard your friend had submitted a few days prior. Taking this one step further, you're a contractor by trade and planning on bidding on the same job. As a council, you have no additional authority over another member of the public or your quote unquote friend who had submitted that quote a few days earlier and knows you will be bidding on the same job, to obtain a copy of that quote before staff have had an opportunity to review and prepare a report on it for council's information as a whole. And this goes for other types of documents, not just quotes. And so in terms of council acts as a whole, and members of council have no authority as individuals to take action on behalf of the municipal corporation, except in conjunction with other members constituting a quorum of the council, unless specifically authorized by statute or a bylaw of the municipality. And this is where we want to try and work together. However, please allow staff to try and work expeditiously as we can. Could we have done the process a little more polished? Absolutely, but we're under a time crunch and we haven't handled this file before. And it was staff's understanding that various members of council were already aware of the abilities that Dr. Patchogue-Fraser can afford to do on these inland lakes. So that was pretty much what I was going to say. Thank you.
Point of clarity, Your Worship,
Yes.
and a follow-up question as well, if I may. Point of clarity. Back in February, when we passed the additional amounts of money, and this is a question to our clerk as well as council, if they recall. Did we not specify that the additional monies were available right away? It didn't have to go through the budget, if memory serves me correctly. Rather, we approved the additional funds at that point in time in February. Memory serves me correctly. I think we approved it.
But
Right there
why,
and there.
why, I mean, I don't remember exactly what we said at that time, but why is that relevant to today's discussion?
Well, it's relevant because the timeline from February to April would have allowed or would have provided staff a little bit more time to have facilitated some conversations. And I think what I'm getting at here is that we've all seen how bad shoot first, ask questions later happens in our township, specifically with garbage and what the district has done to our garbage changes. I'm seeking to socialize in advance of a staff report and in advance of a council decision, which I believe has already been made on what it is that they're going to be getting, to be able to then capture their feedback and articulate it here today. I think, Councillor, and perhaps I'm not summarizing correctly, and Councillor Belichick can correct me on this, but I think he was kind of agreeing in that our process didn't follow through. What we would normally do is consult. Then once we've consulted with those, the general public, we would then execute on that consultation. Whereas here, my understanding is that perhaps what we're going to do is we're going to move something in January, or June, in June, and then consult after the fact. I also want to, and this is where the follow-up question or the follow-up comment is, Mr. CAO Mariotti made a valid, example, but I think the example doesn't really bear fruit here in this particular circumstance, because unlike his example, whereby it was an open RFP and perhaps there were other companies bidding, in our example today, it's a sole source contract and the vendor has already been chosen, and the scope of work has already been provided. So there's really no possible way for us to provide any advantage to another bidder on this particular example, because there is no other bidder. It's a sole source contract. The vendor has already been chosen. So the information that we would receive, if council so wills it today, would not necessarily impact the bidding process in any way, shape, or form, nor would it impact our procurement policies. Rather, it would just simply be there to provide information to our constituents in advance of the meeting in June. And again, that would allow our constituents at least some input on what we're receiving in advance of the discussion in June. Thank you.
I'm going to go to council. Do you want to say something?
The resolution noted, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to set aside within the 2023 budget of up to 25,000 in land water quality testing. So it was not approved at that time and had to go through the budget process.
I'm going to go to Councillor Predko, because I don't believe you've spoken this matter yet, before I go forward to Councillor Hazelton.
Sure, thank you. I just really wanted to again clarify that the motion we passed last council meeting was for $25,000, not for $10,000. That number has been but at last, Karen was talking about the budget, but at last week's, the resolution was for $25,000. So we did discuss that the price that had been given by Dr. Chow Fraser was in the neighborhood of $10,000, but we kept the resolution at $25,000 and we didn't lower it. I appreciate there's a lot of moving parts this week and last week. I think Ms. Nicholson has been working, I think, trying to finalize a lot of what those details might be. And I would probably not be surprised if when the staff report comes back, the dollar figure might not be exactly $10,000. I suspect that we'll probably learn that there's some variance, and that's due to things that she's learned over the course of the last couple of weeks. If that number is not set and the scope of work is variable, I think that we do have an obligation to wait until that is finalized. And if that's when a staff report comes out next week, I think that's the appropriate time that we should hear what the numbers are.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelton.
No, I'm still alive. So with all due respect, CEO Mariotti, I heard you read from a policy document. What you read sounded reasonable. We actually have lots of policy documents. We have one, the brand and communication guide, which I would say we never follow ever. And so we have tons of these documents. Often they're difficult to find. Very rarely do we follow them to the T. And what I think I'm hearing on this topic is there's a lot of common sense understanding that providing this information much sooner would have been a smart strategy and probably an easily understandable approach, even though it may have not followed the dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's of a policy document. And I think that in order for us as a township to be effective in working together, we need to understand where some of these gray areas are and expedite things so that we can get to a better place, because right now we're battling over policies. And as I said earlier, we have a ton of policies that we don't follow. So why do we pick one policy and say we have to follow that one?
Councillor Hazelton, I don't think you're being at all fair to council or staff when we say tons of policy that we don't follow. I don't think that is appropriate remark. There's no question, like most policies, most places, no, they're not always followed to the dotted I or the crossed T, as I think you put it. But let's not make these generalizations that suggest that we are not following all our policies. I don't think that's appropriate.
So if we don't follow one policy, is that okay to then not follow another policy? I mean, my point is there are, I could go do the research, but I would guarantee you that there are several policies that we don't follow to the letter, and we show some flexibility on them. And so what I'm trying to get at here is here is an opportunity for us to say, okay,
You've made that point.
thank you.
Third point.
I'd just like to clarify that, yes, the verbiage that CEO Mariotti read in our policy is word for word what is in our policy, but it's written in our policy to provide clarification to what is already law, to what is already precedent setting, to what is already regulations we are obligated to follow, whether it's in our policy or not. This is above and beyond our right to make a decision on what information council may or may not have a right to access. That is something that has gone to court multiple times across the province. And every time it comes down with the same issue and the same order, that council are to be treated as a member of the public when it comes to accessing information. Obviously, when it comes to closed session documentation, there are exceptions to that rule for the protection of the township and private individuals. I'm trying to choose my words very carefully at this point in time, because there's been a lot of, I understand, okay, I'm going to go, can I rewind that thought a little bit?
Yeah, but
Yeah. And maybe I should say nothing. I don't know. There's two debates happening at this table right now. One is about the right to access information as a member of council, and one is about the right to have a quote in this particular circumstance that I don't think anyone is disagreeing to the fact is maybe didn't quite follow the standard order of operations and approvals. But it's the process that happened. Council also is responsible for making decisions along the way. If you weren't comfortable making those decisions, then the report could have been asked for sooner or in a different order, or the funding maybe didn't need to be approved at that time. There is responsibilities of actions on both parts. And staff are actively being blamed in this discussion by some members, and our right and our responsibilities to follow the law and legislation is our statutory responsibility. I cannot be directed to do something that is not within the law, nor will I take any actions. And anything that suggests otherwise is completely disrespectful to myself and any municipality and our government that we stand for, and how we are supposed to follow our processes.
Thank you. We have spent over half an hour talking about going around in circles. And this all was initiated by an individual counselor who, I don't know if it was 10 days ago or when it was, asked individually for some information that staff at the time was not willing to release. That's what started this whole thing.
Point of clarity.
You go ahead, point of clarity.
My initial request did state that I'd be happy if they circulated it to everyone on council. So it was
That's fine.
not me solely looking for it for myself.
An
Thank you.
individual counselor asked for information that staff at the time was not willing to release. I think that's a perfectly factual statement in itself. We've talked about the fact that there information about water testing on the inland lakes is of great interest to a fair number of our residents. That's perfectly true. But we as council, as a whole, even we may not have had 7 votes, I don't remember, but as a whole, council approved sole sourcing of water testing on inland lakes for this year. So we did that. And perhaps we could have received more information at the time, but we made the decision at that time. Done. I think what we're hearing now from council is we'd like to have that information, that report, shared as soon as possible. There's a keen interest amongst our residents to learn more about that water testing. And I think staff fully understand that desire. I don't think it requires another motion from us. We have made a motion that approves sole sourcing. We were promised a report. And we're now been told that report will come out before the June 5th council meeting, which means it'll come out next week. And that was going to be the case whether or not we spent the last half hour plus talking about this. I think the suggestion that some people have made that, well, other councils do things differently. I heard Councilor Hazelton on numerous occasions in the past refer to his advanced planning course and how councils and staff in different communities do things in different ways. I don't know about you, Councilor Hazelton, but I took that advanced planning course and I discovered that the majority of participants were first-term councilors trying to learn more about planning. And I can tell you that what came out of some of their mouths was, based on my experience, I'm going to call it not fully informed. Because they were relatively new. They'd only been in the job a few months. And I'm sure, as all of us can remember when we first started here, and 2 councilors probably that much more fresher memory, is you learn things as you go along. And you think you understand something, you find out later that actually that was only part of the story. So I think we have to be very careful to jump to conclusions that we're doing things wrong because somebody said another municipality is doing something differently. We're also, by the way, council, have the opportunity to make suggestions and changes to our policies and our procedures, for which our staff would review those suggestions to make sure they are consistent with provincial legislation, as well as their own personal advice or experience based on their experience of so many years. So in my mind, we've talked for 3/4 of an hour. Whether or not we pass a resolution or a motion, nothing's going to change in what people are going to do next week.
Point of entitlement.
Sorry?
Point of an entitlement. I want to call to bring to attention. And with the utmost respect to your worship, this is the second time I've heard you speak about timing on another matter, one that impacted constituents in my ward. There was a time crunch whereby we were trying to move things ahead, and dialogue was not essentially allowed, as you mentioned how much time we've spent on it. And here today, we're doing the same thing. We spent over 2 hours discussing garbage. And as I mentioned, I think, at least for my inland lakes, water quality is a very important issue, equal to that of garbage. And here we are again hearing how much time we've spent on this issue. And I would go so far as to say it may be suggestive and somewhat biasing council to believe that we shouldn't spend any much more time on that or on this discussion. Rather, we should just move forward. I can understand your points and I can understand your concerns as well as Madam Clerk's. And perhaps today we don't receive the information. But at the end of the day, I think that we as council should have an opportunity to discuss this fairly without having any time constraints before us. Thank you.
I think you are confusing two things. I'm not talking about, we are not here discussing water quality or water testing. Not whatsoever. We're talking about a request for information that is, we understand it will be forthcoming next week. So this suggestion that I think our conversation has spent enough time, the suggestion that I'm suggesting, that I'm saying that water quality in the inland lakes is not important, is offensive. You're trying to bully me into feeling guilty about because you think I don't think water quality is important, where I think it's extremely important. That's not my point here. So if you have a motion,
I do, yes.
then make the motion, find a seconder, and we'll vote on it.
My motion here today is that we present this question before Rick O'Connor upon his arrival or upon his delegation here.
Sorry?
We already have a process in place on how to provide questions to Rick O'Connor for a training, so I don't believe a motion would be required.
Was that process circulated? Because I don't recall receiving
It
one.
hasn't initiated, but we have
Hold
informed
on.
council already.
Now we're going in a
Process.
completely different direction. We were talking here about a request for information, not about our meeting with Rick O'Connor a couple of months from now.
We were, and the request for information manifested itself into a discussion around whether or not council should be entitled to receive that information or not. And Madam Clerk spoke to the fact that she believes that it is illegal. And I am seeking now clarity as to whether or not, in fact, it is illegal, or whether or not council has the means in which to call a meeting to request data when data is not being presented. As for the information pertaining to water quality, it's clear today that our staff does not want to release that information in advance of the report. And I would strongly suggest that we do not shoot first and ask questions later. Rather, we be inclusive and include our lake associations in capturing input on what it is that they wish to see in advance of making any final decisions. But that ship seems to have sailed. So coming back full circle now on the broader picture, the broader question, which was brought up by Councillor Hazelton on whether or not we are entitled to this information and whether or not it in fact is illegal, I am requesting that this information be brought forward to Rick O'Connor. And just for the record, I was not intending to bully you, rather call to your attention that by providing timelines or suggesting timelines and how much time we're speaking to the matter could be biasing council on believing that it's time to move this forward rather than allowing it to have its due discussion. Thank you.
All right. This was your item. Do you have a particular motion you want to make about request for information for council to consider?
No, I will withdraw it. Thank you.
Right. I have a motion. Moved by Counselor Graziano, second by Counselor Jarvis. Be it resolved that council adopts bylaw 2023-053 to confirm the proceedings of the May 26, 2023 council meeting. All those in favor? That is carried. Moved by Counselor Petco, second by Counselor Hazelton. Be it resolved that council does now adjourn at 12:13 PM until June 5th, 2023 at 9 AM or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And we are now adjourned.